Recording in progress.
Go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we'll pass it to Clementine to do a roll call vote, and then she will also follow up that with announce how to provide public comments for this meeting.
Yes, so I'll just call attendance. Councilmember Barber,
Present.
Councilmember Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Present.
and Mayor Williamson.
Here.
And so for those of us attending in person, wearing a mask is recommended and encouraged, and please keep your phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with our meeting. And there are two ways to join us virtually today. You can use the Zoom app on your computer or mobile device, and you can also call into the Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom on your computer, smartphone, or telephone, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. An up-to-date version of the Zoom software must be used. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, then enter meeting ID 160-772-9333 #. And if prompted to enter participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using and updating Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment using the Zoom app, you can virtually raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you're dialed in by phone, raise your hand by dialing *9 and then unmute yourself when called upon by dialing *6. You must do both. And we will keep public commenters muted until it is their turn to speak, and we'll call on each public speaker in the order of their hands raised. Please stay within the time limit that is established for today's meeting, and a countdown timer will be shown on the screen. If you're connected live on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. Today's meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with about 10 seconds delay, and on Comcast Channel 25 with up to 90 seconds delay. And we look forward to receiving your public comment.
Thanks, Clementine. And with that, we'll do a Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask Dr. Barber to kick us off.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and roll into presentations. Item number 1 on the agenda is proclamations to the Monterey County Health, Montage Health, and Monterey County Emergency Management. We'll pass it to Hans.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Last week, the public health emergency for COVID-19 ended, and over the past 3 years, we worked very collaboratively with various institutions. One of them is Monterey County Health, led by Elsa Jimenez as department head, Dr. Ed Moreno as the public health officer. And as you can imagine, when COVID-19 broke out, there were a lot of questions, a lot of help, and over the course of the pandemic, there were multiple other questions and requests for advice, direction, etc. And we wanted to use the opportunity with the end of the public health emergency to honor those who helped us, and we suggested a proclamation for the Monterey County Health Department, including Elsa Jimenez and Dr. Moreno. They have given us always good advice. Their advice was always science-based. They held the line many times, and I need to say also often in retrospect, they were spot on with a lot of things that they told us, and we were like, no, this cannot be like that, but they were spot on. So we want to honor them and thank them for the work they've done. Another one who is needs to be mentioned as well is Montage Health. Montage Health, led by Dr. Packer, as well as Dr. Martha Bloom, who nobody knew, but then she became a little of a local regional TV personality and giving us advice. Montage Health was fully prepared. You never heard that they had an issue with PPE. That hospital was fully stocked. They were throughout the crisis always ahead of what was going on. And when we had high numbers in the ICU with COVID folks, they were always there to calm us down and talk to us about that they had another full-blown station ready for intake or other stations prepared for that. We also collaborated a little bit in the background with them in case we had mass illnesses and had to place people into prepared staging areas. And Dr. Packer always took my phone calls, always ensured that we got the latest information. And also his team with other professionals briefed the business community weekly about what was going on. So we really had with Montage Health also an health organization that may not have the name recognition beyond the boundaries of our region here, but they could hold their own against those large providers that we have north of us. So we want to honor Dr. Packer, Martha Bloom, and also the entire team of Montage Health, and remember how wonderfully they administers vaccinations as soon as vaccines became available. So again, throughout the crisis, they were there for us and helped us. Last but not least, we want to ask for a proclamation and recognition for former County Administrative Officer Charles McKee, Assistant County Administrative Officer Nick Cholos, Emergency Management Director Kelsey Scanlon, she was just promoted to that, and Monterey County Department of Emergency Management. We, as council, remember we inherited, I think, 20 or 24 passengers from the cruise ship that came out of San Francisco. All of a sudden, they were in Estelomar, and many of us we were thinking we will be dying soon, and they actually took good control of all of that. We had many issues with them as well because we wanted to collaborate. Remember, we prepared Monterey County Fairgrounds as an isolation area. We had beach closures that we coordinated with them. But also during the time in 2020, we had large wildfires. We had COVID and large wildfires. And again, we for the first time, we had actually the real threat of a COVID crisis and evacuating neighborhoods on our eastern border during the river fire, I believe it was called. And so again, we collaborated with them on many topics. How do we put up plastic shields on the wharf for eating, etc.? How can we figure things out? And again, Charles McKee, then County Administrative Officer, was always there. He briefed us city managers daily in the first 4 weeks or so of the COVID crisis. And then, of course, it changed to somewhat another rhythm. And Nick Chulos attended numerous meetings, and Kelsey was always there for us to give us background information, because many times also it depends on personal relationship, and Kelsey was one of those carriers that helped to translate a lot of things. So those three proclamations for those three entities and those individuals, I think, are really showing staff's gratitude and probably also the city's gratitude. They all three helped us significantly to manage a crisis, a COVID public health crisis that we had no idea when it started in February, March, to what extent it would take. So I hope the council can support those proclamations, and then I will hand deliver them to the various folks and institutions.
Beautiful. Sorry, give me 1 second here. So is it, I'm just for clarification, we're just presenting these, or do we need to take a vote? Because it's just a presentation.
You may object, but I think we just.
No, well, thank you for the background on that, Hans. And this is probably, just the tip of the amount of collaboration that has happened between the various stakeholders. And I remember very well just the internal issues that we've had within the city of Monterey, but just kind of as a city, as a region, as a nation, globally, kind of the impacts of the pandemic. And I think obviously folks are still trying to find their way through that and recovering, and we're seeing it in the workforce and people deciding whether or not they want to be in a hybrid environment or a fully remote position. So I think that the recognition of some of our key stakeholders in collaboration locally is well placed, and appreciate you bringing this in front of us, and we'll make sure that they get these. So anybody else on the council have any thoughts, comments?
Yeah.
Councilmember Beth.
Thank you, Hans, for doing this. And I know during that course of the early days in 2019 and 2020, there was a lot of confusion. And I just also want to highlight the fact that we're recognizing a lot of folks that are very deserving of that. But, part of what maybe the public doesn't see is the amount of work it takes place between the governmental agencies behind the scenes, which really takes relationships building. And that tested all of government services throughout the United States, and certainly with us too. So I just want to say kudos to our staff that worked really hard. We got great responses, as was indicated tonight by those that we're recognizing tonight. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of effort to not just the operational side, but really the relationships and the collaboration and communication. So a lot of work. And, when you never drill, you don't know how well you do when the actual event occurs. Well, the event occurred in 2020, and that's when we all know that we had the shared experience of COVID-19. So we've gone through the drill. So the benefits of that is that we have a responsive local government, county government, state government, and certainly federal government that has tested and passed through these events. That really makes us much, much stronger, having gone through the exercise and the drill. So I just want to say kudos to everybody that took a leadership role and had to stand by in those hard days, and lots of weekend calls, a lot of night calls. And I know our city staff really answered the call as well. But thank you for all those that have been mentioned and honored tonight for the hard work and the continued collaboration that we get from Monterey County and our medical services.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Anybody else? Okay, you highlighted a point that I think deserves a lot of kudos too, which is our staff and being out front and forming these relationships. And that goes from city executives down to police and fire, public works, our library staff and recreation staff that I know we're making phone calls to folks in the community. I mean, really everybody on the team really came together during COVID. So, those moments really test us. And I think that our team really rose to the occasion. So a lot of kudos to city staff for the work around COVID. All right, with that, we will go on to public comments for things that are not on tonight's agenda. So if anybody wishes to speak on items that are not on today's agenda, feel free to step up to the mic and you'll have your 3 minutes to speak. Good evening, Jean.
Thank you. I'm Jean Rash. I think these are definitely tangentially related to the agenda tonight, but they're all on the consent agenda, and they really aren't to exactly the point of tonight. So I'm just
Jean, real quick, I would just offer you, we could pull things off of the consent agenda too, if you'd like to come back up and speak.
I don't want to ask for that.
Perfect.
But I do have short things to say. Is this the right time? Okay. For too long, so I'm Jean Rash at Monterey Vista, and I'm speaking as a resident. I also have some insight just as the Monterey NCIP rep and alternate over 9 years. So the first point, for too long, the committee and commission applicants have been vetted only by the mayor. And though I trust your selections and opinions implicitly, interviewing the applicants should not be a one-person assessment. We need a subcommittee to present nominations to the full council. The recommendation process for committee and commission appointment needs to return to the mandates of the board, commission, and committee handbook of the city of Monterey, which states a council subcommittee interviews and makes recommendations for appointments. The rest of you could help him with the load. Number two, I hope this subcommittee will begin to seek the recommendation of neighborhood associations in their evaluations. The recommendation of the community is keenly important, especially for NCIP committee memberships. I understand that the city attorney has been clear that neighborhood associations are not legal entities in the eyes of the city. Okay, we get that. That's clear. But NCIP is based statutorily on a neighborhood system. So strong neighborhood associations are fundamental to NCIP. There have been comments made publicly that NCIP representatives have served without the support of the neighborhood. This fact, or even the perception by the public, is a problem. When residents do not feel included in selecting their NCIP representative, it frustrates attempts by the neighborhood associations to best represent the interest of their membership, and it calls into question if NCIP is truly representative of residents. We need to get their input. Number three, the $784,000 of road maintenance and rehab that's going to Monroe Street. Great, sounds wonderful. Let's underground those utilities. If we're going to tear the street apart, let's underground. We can get the money. We have the SB1 money, Measure S money, and we can reach in and do an NCIP funded project by 2024. Let's stop rebuilding roads without undergrounding them. And number four, kudos to the appointment of William Pizzell, who I don't know, to the Building Appeals Board. He has 3 years experience as an engineer in undergrounding utilities and coordinating with the vendors. Let's really use his expertise and get Monterey undergrounded. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
Good evening, Council and Mayor.
Good evening.
My name is Bob Evans. I'm here on behalf of the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission. The city's budget is not on the agenda this evening, but I assume it's always on your minds. Monterey is the oldest city in California, and Colton Hall is the oldest public building west of the Mississippi. A major part of our history is captured in our 3 museums: Colton Hall and the jail, the Pacific Biological Lab, and the Presidio Museum. According to city statutes, Colton Hall is to be open every day of the year except Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. Since COVID, Colton Hall has been open only Saturday and Sunday and 4 days a week in the summer. This makes the city out of compliance with its own statutes. When COVID hit, all 3 city museums closed and all cultural arts activities ceased. One half-time intern, Jordan Leninger, was retained to look after the museums and our collections. As COVID receded and Jordan's hours expanded from 20 to 30, he has done amazing things, but he is not Superman. Attached to this piece, and I'll give you copies, is a short summary of the Museums and Cultural Arts Division scope of work and some of the current statistics. No cultural arts programs have been restarted. These are programs that benefit residents and visitors. The problem I bring to you is staffing. With the current level of staffing, our museums cannot be fully utilized, and traditional or new cultural arts programs cannot be operated. Our new director of Library and Museums and Cultural Arts has proposed adding a part-time cultural arts assistant and an increase in the budget for museum attendance for the coming fiscal year. I understand the museum attendance budget has been increased slightly, but we still will not have the people power to resume any cultural arts programs or fully open Colton Hall. We were advised to spend the museum's trust fund if you want a part-time cultural arts assistant. Spending your trust funds on personnel without a clear way to replenish the funds in the trust once isn't really very smart, actually. Once the funds are gone, so the people and programs will be gone. Monterey's economy is driven by the military and tourism. Once visitors have seen the aquarium, why would they come back or extend their stay? By not fully opening the museums, we stifle heritage tourism. By not restarting our cultural arts programs, we're not supporting our residents. I urge you and the city manager to reconsider the proposal for the addition of a cultural arts assistant and funded out of the general fund. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
And it's always nice to see the mayor arrive on a bicycle.
You're going to leave us some notes there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Anybody else in the chamber wish to speak on items that are not on this evening's agenda? All right, let's take it online, please.
Yes, we have Tenzin. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Tenzin Kafel. I don't know if you guys can see me, although my video should be on. I did want to let you know that my company, Feel Good Capital, and my experience is that I help small business owners with employee retention credit, but in the past, I've helped them with the Paycheck Protection Program. As Mr. Hans stated that we have came out of COVID, businesses still are hurting in the Monterey County area. And my company, we offer the employee retention credit with my experience doing $50 million in the Paycheck Protection Program. A lot of businesses are out there still suffering with COVID and negatively impacted by the ramifications of COVID. So if they had a shutdown, such as, a shutdown order, let's say from Monterey County or Governor Newsom, they can apply for the employee retention credit. As long as they have 2 employees, they can get up to $26,000 per employee. And I know a lot of business owners are getting phone calls from these ERC companies, but I do urge business owners to stay aware that there are companies out there that do say, hey, we're here to help, but at the same time, they need a minimum of 10 employees or more, and they charge an astronomical fee. Whereas my company, Feel Good Capital, at feelgoodcapital.com, we require only 2 employees, so that way we can help the little guys get the financing they need and the government refunds that they are entitled to. So the employee retention credit helps small business owners get back on their feet, and it doesn't have to be paid back, just like unlike the other programs like PPP and the EIDL. And my company has successfully secured over $5 million in the last year just for small business owners. And the clientele that we do have, they only have about 2 to 10 employees. So we like fighting for the little guys, and we like helping small business owners get back on their feet. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to check out feelgoodcapital.com, and you can learn more about yourselves or learn more about the employee retention credit as well as other financing programs. So that way we can help you get back on your feet. Thank you, guys.
Esther Malkin is next.
Good evening, everybody. I have a 2-part comment. First of all, I want to thank the Parks and Rec Department for putting on 2 very well attended events in our side of the city, specifically aimed at Laguna Grande Park and Villa Del Monte and Casanova Oak Knoll, to get feedback from residents and have more input on the surveys. They did a really, really good job. And, they were out here on a weekend. Nat was here also. I really appreciate the effort that they put into this, because traditionally our side of the city has not gotten this kind of extra effort. So thank you to them. And they need more money too. I'm going to echo Bob Evans, because, they're super understaffed also. And they need to be able to, do more in the cities. And we've got to be prepared for what's in the works for what's going to happen when the old Capitol site needs some attention and work. So I strongly hope that you guys can give them some budget so that they can work on their staffing. Secondly, I want to bring to the attention of the council that we have a problem in the area with renting to families. There is a number of apartments that have been shown online and on the places that people go searching for units that have turned down a family of 4 for a 2-bedroom place, which is not allowed. And when we have, a mother and her 3 kids with the mother that can afford these apartments being told that the maximum is only 3 people for a 2-bedroom. First of all, that's not necessarily legal. I've heard multiple, versions of that. But this is a perfect example of how we are not going to be retaining any of the youth or any of the families in the area. We have more and more leaving. We cannot, allow these renters to be discriminated against because they have children or because they don't have a husband. And those cases have been happening. And you guys don't hear about them, but I do. And this is not the first time that this has come to me. And I strongly suggest that when we talk about the renter situation, we don't just focus on rent cap and rental registry, because there are a number of other things that need to be addressed that are very, very serious and will help us retain some good people that are community involved. And so I appreciate the time that you might give to them as well. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, there are no more hands raised.
Okay. Thank you for all those who shared public comment. And with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. We're going to pull item 9. Is there any other items that the council wishes to pull?
Yes, number 5.
Right. Anything else? All right. Anybody in the public wish to pull anything on the consent in the chamber? 5 and 9 so far. Do we have anybody online that wishes to pull anything?
There are no hands raised.
I'll just orient myself here for a second.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion then to approve the consent agenda minus items 9 and 5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded. I do want to make a comment on item number 13. I know that Gene Rash made a comment on it, and it looks like it's included in the motion for the consent, but I do just want to provide a quick response and remarks, and I think we can talk more offline too in regards to a strategy about how to move forward. But just for a little bit of context and history for those that may not be fully aware of how we transition to the current state of affairs in regards to how recommendations are made for the boards, commissions, and committees. The previous council, when I started on the council in 2018, there was a subcommittee that was formed between the mayor and the vice mayor. And I think part of the reason why it transitioned to just being the mayor making the recommendations was to help with scheduling. I know it was a schedule conflict, oftentimes trying to get the mayor and the vice mayor in the same room, and then also scheduling that with each of the applicants. And so it just made it easier. I'm open to what the council feels like is best. I don't want to try to make all the decisions here. And in fact, the council can reach out to me, and I do consult them without violating the Brown Act in regards to the nominations if I have questions. But I also leave that space open for them. I also leave that space open for the public too, if they have feedback or input in regards to what that looks like. And one idea that I thought of as you were sharing your public comments is, and I kind of almost direct this to staff a little bit, but is that I wonder if there could be an opportunity to, because part of my assumption is that the neighborhood associations might be paying attention to when there's a vacancy on the NCIP, whether it's the primary seat or the alternate. But just in case, could it be helpful for staff to notify the neighborhood associations when a vacancy comes up on NCIP, just for awareness? And then that way, if they have a recommendation for a nomination, they can share that with the mayor. But I don't know how that can maybe be rolled into a process to maybe help create a little bit of transparency and allow them an opportunity to provide feedback or input. So just throwing that out. Maybe we can include that. All right. That's it for me. Any other feedback, council? Okay, let's do roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
and Mayor Williamson.
That's a yes for me. With that, we'll go to item number 5, which is the second reading of an ordinance amending the Monterey City Code for accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. And with that, I will pass it to Councilmember Smith to see what questions you have. Do you need a presentation?
No, I don't think so. I want to focus in on one particular area. So we talked a little bit about this from the first reading, and it had to do with a portion of the ordinance, and I'll call direction to packet page 33. And it is number 2, small d, triple I, 0.5, subsection A and B. Aren't we so glad that we studied how to do this?
Can you say that again, how we navigate there? Because if we don't have the packet, so section 2.
Yes, so it's in agenda item 5.
Mhm.
And if you go down to subsection 2, and then small d, triple I,
2D.
and the title of it is the accessory dwelling unit development standards. And then if you go down to subsection D, and then after D, it's triple I, 3 I's, and it's then number 5. And the last 2 points are talking about opaque and inoperable, as well as clear story. So
So real quick, just for everybody else that may not have the agenda packet, it's on page 6 of the
of agenda item 5.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a second reading, and I brought the topic up when we had the first reading. And I've gotten some members of the public who are in the business of developing a few ADUs in our community, and they've had specific questions about how this will apply. And the concern that I've heard is that we're talking about a second story of an ADU that is within 10 feet of a setback. So suppose it's at 9 feet setback. As this is written, I understand that it's going to require the second story windows that face the property line. If it's inside of that 10 feet, that the windows shall be opaque and inoperable. And then the new portion that's been added here is clear story windows. So I wanted to have staff address how this will work and see if there isn't some way to navigate around this so we don't have to get down the road with applicants having a conflict and then having to go to the planning commission under variance and then having to come back. So I've heard a lot about this one, so I think we just need to make sure I understand and see if there's something else we should do to this.
So it's a policy question, and the council has complete discretion whether to keep these requirements for opaque and inoperable and clear story windows or not. So I want to just put that on the table. How this language was crafted under the little I's, the 3, you'll see it's second story accessory dwelling unit above a garage or carport. The original ADU law didn't allow second story ADUs. And the planning commission recommended in the past that the city be more flexible than state law and allow ADUs above garages or carports. When they made that recommendation, they discussed by being closer to the property line and a second story, that it could have privacy impacts on the adjacent properties. And in light of that, the planning commission recommended opaque and inoperable and clear story windows. So this actually was crafted I think we've amended our ADU ordinance 3 or 4 times now. This was with the last amendment. Since then, in certain circumstances, ADUs, this last version allows increased height in ADUs. The old law was 16 feet. The new law allows a 2-story 25-foot ADU attached to the house. And then if it's detached, it's 18 feet. So our ordinance is still more lenient than state law by allowing up to 25 feet to a detached garage or carport to allow a second story. So that was how this was crafted or why it was crafted. The challenge that one applicant is experiencing right now, it's an R3 property in New Monterey neighborhood. There's an existing single-family house. They're proposing a second-story ADU above a garage. They put the bedrooms across the back of the property, so along the rear property line, 4 feet from the rear. I believe it's 4 feet from the rear property line. And bedrooms require egress. So as they've designed it, they can't, it doesn't meet this standard because you have to have the ability for, in the building code, for egress out of bedrooms. There is a way to design the project to make it comply, but it would make it smaller than they would want it to be. The windows would have to face towards the front of the property. And maybe the bedrooms would have to go in front of the living room, which would probably take away their views from their living room that they're trying to also achieve. So it's completely up to the discretion of the council on opaque and inoperable or clear story windows, if you want to keep that or not. If you want something that's more maybe in the middle, maybe you don't want to, you want privacy, you want to keep the opaque, maybe just allow them to be operable. Because if it's operable, then you can have the correct exiting, even though if it would, but the bedroom windows, then you wouldn't be able to see out of them, right?
Right.
So that's the balance. Do you want more privacy for the neighbors because our ordinance is less restrictive than state law? Or do you want to be in the middle of the ground and have opaque and allow them to be operable? Or do you want it to be as written?
Yeah. So here's where I'm at, because based on what I've been hearing is the difficulty, as you've outlined it, is that sometimes the size is constraining it. And usually we're talking about smaller units with less and less options. But isn't it true that if there's a setback of like the narrowest of 4 feet for a new ADU, the likely neighborhood is going to have a setback that's 5 feet unless they've built an ADU. So there's going to be 4 feet on one side and likely 4 feet at least on the other side before there's a structure.
In some cases, yes, but in some cases, no. So I would say that's probably true for side yard setbacks. It's roughly between 4 to 5 feet. It can vary. Rear yard setbacks for just single family houses or multifamily range typically between 15 to 20 feet from the rear yard.
Yeah.
If they do an accessory structure, they're able to go within 5 and 5.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it's not just 4 feet and then there's all of a sudden eyes. It's likely 4 feet plus then a setback on the adjacent property as well.
Correct, for existing construction.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm going after here is I'm just thinking that there should be some reworking of the language that allows staff to be able to approve of these applications that are reasonably designed and accommodating the privacy through opaque windows. But it seems unreasonable to demand that something has to be inoperable when we would be talking about possibly a bedroom, which means you can't have it inoperable because it's got to be big enough to get out of. Then that means that it's maybe a bathroom. And if it's a bathroom that's within that setback close proximity, then we're basically saying that window's got to be opaque and that bathroom window can't open, or that kitchen can't open a window. It just seems like restricting the operable window design in a whole structure to accommodate appropriate ventilation and cooling on the hot days we have them. And if you don't have windows that can open in structures, now you're talking about upgrading to air conditioning. So it just seems like we're going down the path, if we keep this, into something that puts us in conflict with the real life design of what's happening in the world of ADUs in our community. So I'd just like to hear what the council would offer and think in terms of how to accommodate this so we don't pit ourselves into a conflict where applicants for the much needed ADUs are constantly having to come to get variances. So that's why I pulled it.
I would just offer, and I'm trying to recall my days from being on the ARC and dealing with even single family residential units that may have had an impact on privacy and how those were handled. And I'm just kind of wondering I can't recall exactly how that was handled, but what does that look like? If it was a single family with a second story, and by adding that second story, it looked into somebody's bedroom, how would we handle that situation?
So for single family, we still have discretion. And so the Architectural Review Committee, if it was brought up as an issue, may talk about offsetting the window. So there's not one window directly facing another window at the 4-foot side yard setback. They may discuss having it be a clear story window, so that being up above 6 feet, so between 6 and 8 feet in the plate, so it's up higher. They may require, rarely did they actually require it to be opaque, some sort of film or some different type of glass.
Could we do something similar to that in regards to the ADUs?
So the challenge with that is we only can have a checklist, right? There is no discretion for ADUs allowed under state law. So that it has to be a checklist at the building department and we go through it. If you're wanting to do that, I would recommend removing the word inoperable and allow it to be operable, and remove the requirement for clear story windows for exiting, because clear story windows aren't going to count for exiting either. They have to be lower. So in a fire, you can break the window out.
Yeah.
That's what I would think as well, because then you're still addressing the privacy issue. And I just think that's a good idea to have it to be operable, not only for purposes, of making sure it's safe and as far as being able to exit if you need to. But I think it just meets both at the same time. And it doesn't really need to be, I wouldn't think it would, the clear part, but you could take that part out. And could we just have opaque and operable? Can we just have that part out and take the clearest part out?
So sorry, can you clarify what part are you saying to?
So what I'm suggesting is if we had it as opaque and operable, and then the clerestory windows with this clerestory window part. Now that's an ordinance, is that correct?
It's part of the ordinance, yeah.
That was our existing ordinance from 2022 we adopted. So I think what you're suggesting is to eliminate B and to change A to opaque and operable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm going to offer one suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
There may be scenarios where the developer doesn't want an operable window. They may want it for exiting, but if it's up higher, they may not, like a clear story window, they may not want to make it operable. I would, if that's the way you're going, I would just say A, opaque, and eliminate and operable or in clear story windows and
That way
eliminate
they can
that.
choose what they want to do there.
I mean, if you're wanting to
Take off
provide
the part.
flexibility.
Okay.
Right. And I think
Move
that
that.
in the spirit of, I know that it's got to be precise and they're not going through the ARC. And so this has got to be complete for staff so that they can make faster approvals that are designed accordingly. But I can foresee if we don't change this, we'll have conflicts down the road. And talking to the city manager today, I believe he said that we've had 42 applications or some number like that of ADUs. Is that since January, Hans?
No, I said, I think we have about 46 ADUs since October in processing.
Okay. Okay.
That's
I
kind of,
didn't- I didn't check, so.
yeah, I
don't know.
checked
Sorry.
with building inspection last week.
Yeah, and it's encouraging that this is happening because these are going to be additional living units. But I don't want to get us into a point where we are only allowing such restricted living conditions where it's really substandard and somebody doesn't have an open window in a bathroom or a bedroom. So I just think it should be, let's trust the process with designers. And if we get into trouble and we see it's not working, then we have to come back and modify something. But I think that that's a good suggestion.
Kim or Hans, you mentioned that we've had something like 46 applications. How many have had this issue?
I'm aware of one.
Okay. Thank you.
But this additional opaque and non-operable is not, hasn't been in the ordinance the whole time. It's relatively new.
Correct. It was in, well, it says here in 2022. It was the last version of the ordinance that we tried to provide more flexibility.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I would like to take it out to the public for public comment.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let's take it out to the public. Anybody in the chamber wish to make a comment on this agenda item? All right, let's take it online, please.
None, no hands raised.
Alan.
Yeah, so I mean, I appreciate the intent of Councilmember Ed. I do have some concerns about privacy, and 4 feet is not a lot of setback. We were looking at someone putting up a 25-foot home 4 feet from the side of ours, and it was going to be looking in our living room, our bathroom had, you know, our bedroom. Anyhow, I mean, I have some concerns about this, and I think that this is one of those things that I'm a little worried that we're sort of making policy for one condition, one person out there who's got an issue with this, but as we heard from the city planner, could redesign it if they wanted to comply. So I think this is also the kind of thing where, you know, right now you might be doing this because you honestly want to help this person, and it's a legitimate good thing to want to help them. But you may end up down the road having a lot of really unhappy neighbors when there's somebody putting in something really close. And if the window's operable, you know, I don't know if there would be a way to make sure that that doesn't allow them to look into their neighbor's home in a way that would violate their privacy. I don't know, but if it's open, you can stick your head out. I don't know. Sounds are going to really travel through that open window. I just have some concerns about this, especially since we haven't really had a lot of public input, or I don't know if the public knows about this. So that I get the intent. If there's a way to do it where people's privacy can be protected, I would definitely support it. I feel like right now I need to hear more from the public, and I don't think they know about it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So just one additional comment before we maybe get to a motion.
Absolutely.
And I can respect your comment, Alan, about, because we certainly want to have a balance of neighborhood privacy, and everybody needs their space, and we don't want to be, you know, on top of each other. But a typical home is set back about 5 feet. The ADU in this particular case could be 4 feet. So I think it would be reasonable to expect that a designer is going to put these windows where they're not conflicting with a neighbor right across. But it's a case of the window being open eliminates the other problem, which is when you have a non-operable window for a bedroom, then you have to have air conditioning. So we're adding to the cost. If we have a bathroom that's put there, and let's call it dead space, and you put the smaller rooms or a hallway or closet, maybe that works. But if you've got a bathroom and you can't open the window, to me, that doesn't seem reasonable. And so these units are smaller and not a lot of options frequently, because your entry's got to be on a certain side. And then you get involved in all kinds of design problems and conflicts. And you start running out of the choices of where you can put your living space, because you have to have an open window, because that's what state law says. So it's a balance of, you know, how much can we push, but we also have to get more housing units, and ADUs that are being applied for is a good thing, because someone's going to have a place to live. They're not generally that big in space. Generally, the ADUs you're finding out that there's 1 and 2 people. And if it's a larger ADU, I suppose it could be, you know, more people. And we do have noise abatement procedures when that does occur, when there's certainly, you know, a complaint process to have somebody, you know, turn their music down or their noise down. But I think the good balance is that if it's opaque and it's operable, I think that's a good compromise.
Dr. Robert.
I was actually scratching my head, but.
Oh.
okay.
But you got called on instead.
Is that a motion?
That, but I agree with, Councilman, Smith, because for me, the operable piece is safety. Because if I was living in there and fire broke out and it's inoperable and I'm on that floor, I don't want to be having that issue of, I can't even get out because I'm gonna have to literally just break the glass to get out for safety purposes. You know, if you're on the second floor, that's what I'm looking at is safety. Like if it's opaque, it's already gonna deal with privacy because you can't see through it. And yes, it can be open, but then that's something that can be like on a case by case issue if it becomes a problem, right? But I feel like it's still a safety issue if it's inoperable and I'm on the second floor, especially if it's a bedroom and fire breaks out.
I can understand that, except I think the requirement, I'm sorry.
No, real quick. I just want to check in with Gino. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share at this point?
Not at this point. Not at this point. Thank you. It's still kind of working through my mind. Thank you.
So before I let you jump in, Alan, let me share some quick thoughts here. I'm in agreement with Ed on this, particularly because of that last point that you made in regards to the need for us to accelerate ADUs within the community. And, you know, I think that we're going to be talking about this when we get to our housing element over the next few months. Actually, next month, we're going to be having a joint session with our planning commission. And I imagine that we're going to be having an expectation for our mixed use zones within the city to deal with a lot of high density. But every part of our community needs to play their part. And I think that the single family residential parts of our community do that by removing the barriers that prevent ADUs from being constructed. I respect the concerns in regards to privacy. I think to Dr. Barber's point around opaque windows, allow for a level of balance associated with those concerns. If the window's able to open, you know, there might be some issues there. But I mean, why can't we all just be one big happy family? I mean, you know, I think we can find ways of mitigating, you know, issues with our neighbors if we can be, you know, kind and respectful to one another. And I'd hate for us to create a policy that creates a more restrictive community as opposed to allowing us to move forward in a more aggressive way with the ADUs.
So it looks like I'm going to lose this one, which is fine. I just want to say two things. One, as far as safety goes, this doesn't have to be a bedroom. It could simply be redesigned. It sounds like there's space for them to do that. It would change the layout. It might change how many bedrooms they have, but I totally agree about the safety issue, but it's kind of a design choice and that's what's creating the safety issue. So I don't think it's an inherently a safety issue. As far as like making sure that we're promoting housing, agree with that. And that's why I asked the question about how many of these have been an issue. If the planning director had said, oh, there've been 5 or 10 or something like that, then I would be totally on board. But 1 out of 46 is less than 2%. And so for me, the privacy concern just kind of outweighs that. But thank you very much.
I'm going to ask for a motion. Let's get to a motion.
I'll make a motion that we take on packet page 32, agenda item 5, on item page 6, and I'll go through its 2 accessory dwelling unit development standards, small d, small i's, 3 of them, 5, and subsection A and B should state opaque and drop the inoperable. Kim, does that cover where we at?
And the B, part B.
And part B, you feel is unnecessary? Clear story?
I think it'll be a barrier.
Okay, and drop B. And that's part of my motion.
Okay, so your motion is to approve the ordinance and change the language to opaque or just opaque.
Yeah, opaque.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there a second for the motion? All right. Any last comments on this?
Yeah, thank you for the patience. I know this is getting into the technical of how the sausage is made. But I want to see ADU applications go correctly, smoothly, not adversely impact staff or conflict with council policy, so we can get more ADUs built appropriately in the city of Monterey and eliminate future conflicts that causes people to have to file variances and add 6 months to a project. So I appreciate the patience and appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Barbara, I see you scribbling away there. You wanted to make a comment before we wrap this up. I'll just add one final note, and I meant to say this earlier, but I wonder how much this might become a greater issue as we obtain more water and create more opportunities for people to create more ADUs. 46 or 48 seems to be a low number of ADUs in the grand scheme of things. And I just wonder if we're limited to those that only have the available water supply. Anybody else?
Well, since October, so we're on the direction to add.
Yeah, before you take a vote, I went back into the spreadsheet. I was not correct. January 22 to today, a little bit over 40. I haven't counted it exactly yet, but I just did a quick check. So it's about 42, I want to say.
Thank you for that.
In less than a year.
Yes, a little
More than a
Oh,
year.
more,
Yeah.
you said 22. Okay.
Mhm.
I never said I was good at math. So a little more than a year. So
Yeah.
that's good.
As much as I love this conversation, I'm going to ask
it.
for a roll call vote.
Mr. Mayor, if
Oh.
I may, really quickly, I just want to clarify that
Only the city attorney can, yes.
this will have to come back for a second reading.
I was going to ask that, but
Mhm.
yes. And I'm assuming it'll be on our consent again.
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully folks are happy.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoppa,
No.
and Mayor Williamson.
Yes. All right, item number 9, Alvarado Street Maintenance District Engineers Report. Can I ask who polled?
Councilmember Barber.
Okay,
So I pulled it just to get background, since this is kind of something that we as new, if I'm speaking for Gino, not Gino and I, but we're both new. And this way we're able to get a little bit of background on the engineering pieces in the report here. So I really just wanted it for more clarification and background.
could you speak maybe a little bit more specifically in regards to where staff might be able to clarify?
We're ready for a quick presentation, Mayor.
Exactly.
Okay,
And it's I'm not speaking on behalf of Dr. Barber though.
No,
But it's a fair question because it sounds very confusing. Engineer report for Calliope and Alvarado Street, and what really stands behind it is
as long as
the-
staff
the-
is ready to go,
the
that,
core question that
yeah, I didn't catch them off guard.
okay, okay, all right.
we have a very brief presentation to explain that we do this and we do this for Alvarado Street and Calle Principal. The item that was pulled is just dealing with Alvarado Street, but it's the parallel universe is next to the other street, Calle Principal. We do this every year, so for us it's kind of a standard item, but it's worthwhile for the public also to learn what stands behind it. And Cody Jennings from an upcoming superstar in our engineering division will give you a stellar presentation now,
I
which
appreciate
is
that.
And he said that
short.
publicly, so make sure you put that in your employee input into your performance evaluation. Really quick, I just asked if we can try to keep this as short as possible. I know we have a couple of other items, and I know that when this comes back when we're counting the ballots, we'll have a presentation then too. So I think that will provide but I mean, unless folks particularly are interested in that, but I just brevity, short these. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans, for the wonderful introduction. Yes, like you said, I'm Cody Jennings. I'm from the engineering department here at Public Works. And there's a brief presentation on our city operated assessment districts, the Alvarado and Caipi. So just briefly, both these, the Alvarado Street Assessment District and the Caipi Assessment District were established in 1985 and 2000, respectively. These districts were established under the authority of the Municipal Improvement Act of 1913 and the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. And these acts just kind of define what we can fund with the assessment district monies. The goals that we try to achieve with our assessment districts are to provide additional services beyond the normal maintenance activities to the public area adjacent to the parcels within our established districts. This additional maintenance includes sidewalk washing every 3 weeks, weekly planter maintenance, weekly waste bin cleaning, and graffiti removal as needed. Some other notable improvements over the years include the planter installation, waste bin replacement. We like those nice cans, and then the tree light installation. And these maintenance and improvement efforts are made possible in large part by our wonderful park staff. So shout out to them. Just a typical kind of operation, annual operation for us. Our city staff, we meet with the owners of the assessment districts. And from there, we kind of develop a plan of what improvements they'd like to see, what maintenance they'd like to see for the year. And then from those meetings, we'll prepare the engineering report as is attached in the agenda packet. And that just defines the improvements and then calculates our annual assessment. And then from there, we'll put out the assessment ballots and they'll be mailed to each property owner, and then they can vote whether to adopt or not for the assessment. And that's all.
Wow.
Short.
That
Yeah.
the mayor give you an applause.
questions,
Add that to your performance evaluation as well. Okay, questions, concerns, council?
I couldn't hear his first name.
Cody,
Cody. Thank you, Cody.
Cody,
You
when,
lived up to it.
when did you come on board?
2020, January. So
Okay,
Where have you been?
We hit them.
We
I'm right upstairs.
right upstairs. Kimas? Okay,
Thank
let's
you.
take it out to the public for any public comments. Anybody in the chamber? All right, let's take it online, please.
No hands raised.
All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve this item.
I'll second that.
Any last minute discussion? All right, roll call vote, please. Thank you, Cody.
Councilmember Hoppa,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Williamson.
It's a yes for me. Move on to public appearance items. Number 15, compatible use study. And I will pass it to Hans for staff presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A compatible use study. I remember when we had the first meeting in the conference center, it was, I believe, late 2019 when we started this off, and then COVID-19 happened, and of course, a lot of things delayed this compatibility study. What is a compatibility study? It's basically trying to balance the needs between communities and military installations. It's basically trying to find a planning balance between the sometimes competing interests of communities and military installations. And so we conducted this compatibility use study over the past 3 years with the help of outside consultants. And with that, I asked Kim to introduce the item to you. There's no action necessary by the council. You will receive the report about the completion of this study right now. And again, as I stated, we have a combo presentation by Kim as well as our consultants from Matrix. So with that, I ask him to continue.
Thank you, Hans, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Larry Dotson with Matrix Design Group, and as Hans stated, we've been working with the city of Monterey over the past couple of years on this compatibility use study. It is a regional study, and it is greater than the city proper, but the city has been a gracious sponsor of the project and a great working partner. And so the study team, from our perspective, is a Matrix Design Group. I'm Larry Dotson. I'm one of the principal planners for Matrix. I'm joined tonight by Brent Cox, who's a certified planner, and Clayton Livingston. We've been working really closely with Kim Cole, Director of Planning, and occasionally we get the luxury of having engagement with Hans. He's always wonderful to work with. This project is 90% federally funded through the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. as a DoD grant, it does come with a particular set of parameters to address issues of compatibility around military installations, and that's the purpose of it. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little delay with my slides deck. Well, I'll skip to the what compatibility is. Hans introduced the topic with that. It's a balance between essentially requirements for the presence of military installations and surrounding defense communities. It evolved out of a program. It initially started as a program within the Department of Defense looking at encroachment issues, which were really land development issues or development towards military installations and the kind of friction that can occur in those situations. In the case of Monterey in the greater region, the military has been a big part of the Monterey Peninsula for a long time. And in the case of the city, both the Presidio and Naval Support Activity Monterey and the Naval Postgraduate School in particular have kind of grown up together with the city as the city has developed over several decades of presence. And so the compatibility looks to see how to balance competing interest and competing requirements. Sometimes the military operations nationwide tend to have an effect on neighboring properties, and sometimes neighboring properties and policies, community policies can have a limiting impact on the ability of the military to train and conduct operations. So the goal of the study is to promote a more active partnership and a more amicable environment between military bases and surrounding communities, which for the case of Monterey, the city, that is not, Monterey is one of the exceptions. It is one of the leaders in partnership with both the Presidio and the Naval Support Activity. But that is not always the case when we look at these projects across the nation. So what is this particular study about? Or I'll start with what it's not. This study, the report that is presented, has been presented to Kim for acceptance, and we're in the round of administrative final review of the document. The report is a report on the project in a study. It is not a regulatory document. There are no enforceable actions. There are no commitments. It really is a body of information produced by the consultants in collaboration with the project stakeholders and with the influence of the public throughout the process. And this body of information typically serves to influence policy decisions in local government, both in the North County study area as well as South County study area. The recommendations are a set. They're not exhaustive. They're not intended to be all recommended for execution. The study makes a set of recommendations for a holistic consideration. So when you get to the implementation phase or looking at the next step of the project, it's those things jurisdictions can consider if they choose to pursue implementing actions as a result of this study. So the study is looking for, first and foremost, and this is more of the case with Fort Hunter Liggett and Camp Roberts in the south part of the county and the northern part of San Luis Obispo County. It's really looking at health, safety, and welfare of residents. Typically, we see with military installations the impacts of noise, overflight, aviation accident potential. In the case of Fort Hunter Liggett and Camp Roberts, there's a tank trail that traverses next to Lake Nacimiento and communities around the lake. And so that is more of a traditional kind of compatibility issue. With regard to the North County, health, safety, and welfare really it applies across the board, both to personnel that work in on military installations and the community residents. There is a shared equity set in terms of public safety with regard to the risk of wildland fire and safe evacuation of the peninsula. So those issues were also looked at in the study. And then obviously there's the need to promote and maintain the quality of life. This particular study did look at a lot of issues involving housing, access to childcare, and such for military members and their families. So the purpose of the study is to promote compatible development in the vicinity of military installations with the long history of Presidio Monterey being one of the first footprints on the peninsula, and then later the arrival of the Naval Postgraduate School. That military installation development has occurred concurrently with the development of the cities of Monterey, Marina, Delray Oaks, Seaside, Sand City, and Pacific Grove. And so that growth has occurred symbiotically, if you will, over time. And it's really a case of, it's less about compatibility and influencing compatibility as it is about adaptability. And we see that that trend emerging across the country where, development's going to occur. You're not going to stop development. The OLDC, the Office that funds these studies, does not want to be in a position of advocating against the development. They want development to occur in and around military installations, but the hope of the program is to influence so that the development works well with both sides of the fence line, both the military side and the defense community side. So they do want to protect those economic opportunities for the surrounding communities. And as you'll see come out in the slide, military installations have a very positive economic impact at the state, regional, county, and local levels. Why it's important for the military bases, less so in the northern North County study area, is most of the missions there. Of the three principal footprints, the Navy, the Army, and the Defense Military Data Center. Those are dominantly administrative functions, so they don't have a lot, they're not tremendously impacted by their ability to conduct their administrative missions, whether that's training, classroom training, or data management, or research and technology. Those aren't affected so much by the community around it, whereas as the bases in the south part of the county have a more operational training requirement that influences the surrounding areas and is influenced or can be restricted by activity in the surrounding community. But the interest of the program and the grant itself is to achieve and protect the sustainment of military installations, and that investment the Department of Defense has made in those installations over time. It is a very costly venture in the multiple billions of dollars to relocate a military installation or transition functions from one location to the next. We talked about the economic impact. The military impact for the state of California is the #1 benefact or receives is the highest state with a military economic impact. So it is really vital to the state economy, the presence of the military across North California and Southern California. It's a big part for Monterey County, and it's a big part for the city. Monterey County is in the top 10 counties in the state, and it is a top tier county across the nation for the value of economic impact received from the presence of military installations. So it's important economically to the jurisdictions as well. And I apologize, I had a little bit of latency in the slides. So how do you achieve compatibility? The means to achieving compatibility, maintaining compatibility and preserving compatibility into the future. You can use hard tools such as policy and regulations, but the preferred methods and means of achieving compatibility are really softer methods that are on the left-hand side there. You know, greater education of the public, education of elected officials, such as yourselves, education of military commanders that may be new to a location, enhanced communication, enhanced coordination, and enhanced partnership. And you might ask yourself, well, what does the city of Monterey need with we have one of the best partnerships in the country with our military installations of the Presidio Naval Support Activity in Monterey. In fact, and you all are probably, I know Hans is very well aware of this, but the intergovernmental support agreement that was pioneered between the Presidio and the city of Monterey that started 20 years ago has now been adopted into federal statute. It is now endorsed by service policy from all the services. And it is radically shifted how the Department of Defense spends its military budget, and it also has radically shifted the partnerships between local government and military installations across the country, not just in Monterey. So with the history of being a trendsetter or leader in partnering military installations, you might ask, what do we have to do? I mean, what do we have to prove? We've already kind of proven it. We would say bilaterally, your partnership and communication is excellent, but multilaterally, when you look at bringing everybody to the table that has an equity set in compatibility throughout the county, that multilateral communication is not always formalized. It is not always on a set agenda. It is typically point to point and personality based. And so there are places that we've noted in the study where communication, partnership, and coordination can be enhanced. And if you do that, you avoid having to do the hard work of changing policy and adopting regulations that you guys were talking about, and that you do at every council meeting like you were doing tonight. So we're at the end of this long 24-month road. We're essentially at the publication of the final study and completing that. We're at administrative review, checking crossing the T's and dotting the I's, so to speak. We started it off with a kickoff quite a while ago while we were in the throes of COVID. We did extensive stakeholder engagement and interviews with every jurisdiction that participated in the study. The King City, City of Paso Robles, we talked to Delray Oaks, we talked to Marina, we talked to obviously your staff, we talked to all the military installations in North and South County. So we did an extensive set of interviews. We did a lot of GIS-based map analysis and characterized what we could spatially. Some of the things that we looked at didn't necessarily align to a map, but where we could leverage mapping technology, we did that. We characterized mission footprints. We existed the policy set from the federal level through the state, through the county, to the local level. We used a set of factors to assess compatibility issues. And then out of that, we engaged in dialogue with the stakeholders to develop a set of recommended actions or recommended strategies or recommended things that could be looked at to potentially be implemented in the future if a local government is willing to do so. It talked about the extensive amount of interviews we did. We also did a lot of, we did quite a bit of work with the water districts in terms of doing a little bit closer looks at the water quality and water availability for the peninsula. And knowing, and we heard the mayor talking about that earlier this evening about, aligning accessory dwelling units to availability of water. You just went through the historic torrents of the atmospheric rivers that hit the peninsula and the rest of the state over the preceding couple of months. And they may have detracted from a lot of the drought considerations of long-term persistent chronic drought that we noted in the study, and that jurisdictions should be considering looking at. That torrent, if you will, is actually aligns with what the scientists predict, that you'll get longer periods of prolonged and persistent droughts broken up by historic levels of rain events, severe weather and hard rains. So you're going to go back and forth between those, but over time, we, according to our reading of the scientific experts, water availability will be an issue into the future for the region. We also made available throughout the study a project website, and on that project website were a variety of tools to the public, a virtual open house. We had an ID places map where folks could interactively let us know where to look, give us information on particular issues that were of concern to them. And then we had a number of, we opened up a number of the committee meetings, the technical and policy level committee meetings to the public, and offered the public the opportunity to comment. And then we also held dedicated public meetings using virtual technologies. And then the city also did a couple of its own. It did a sensing session, and then did a kind of a local public meeting that was focused on the city proper and the neighborhoods around the Presidio and the Naval Postgraduate School. Did a lot of reading, a lot of research, and tried to put our arms around an exhaustive body of information to really illuminate what is important regionally, not just locally, but regionally, that is concerning to all the military installations and all the defense communities throughout the county. The set of factors, we leverage a set of standard factors to evaluate potential issues. If it comes up, it'll come up in a couple slides. So I'll walk you through some of those compatibility factors. But we had this, due to the enormity of Monterey County, a very large county. We decided in consultation with Hans and Kim to split the project into two components, a North County study area component and a South County area study component. And that had two primary reasons for that. The nature of the missions were radically different. As I stated earlier, it's mostly administrative functionalities for the bases in the north. In the south, it is your traditional military training and exercise, kind of go to war readiness type of activity sets that often are more obtrusive to surrounding communities than administrative functions like you have with Presidio and the Naval Postgraduate School. We did look at all the, I'm sorry, jump ahead. We did also talk to all the communities. We had the luxury of having 2 county supervisors participate, mayors from Delray Oaks and Seaside participated, and we had Hans as a city manager participated as well. So it was a broad broad representation of communities, a variety of elected levels of elected leadership and staff throughout the region, throughout the peninsula, that added to the value of the study. So what we found when we look at we analyzed the factors, we looked at the traditional development factors, which have evolved out of the encroachment challenges the military faced several years ago when the program started. We looked at land use, we looked at roadway capacity, we looked at public safety issues. We also looked at more towards a resiliency focus with the resource factors and looking at shared resources for air and water, land space competition, and those things where the limited resources in a particular geographic area are shared by both the military and the community, and how do you balance those requirements. And then with this particular study, we did probably a deeper dive into social factors. A lot of emphasis into housing, the perception of housing availability, and the impacts of outside constraints on the ability of local government to stimulate housing, looking at the challenges you have with the regional housing needs assessment and state mandated goals vis-a-vis the military needs for housing and those things. And then we looked at a couple of cultural resource issues, mainly nested in human remains and those kinds of sensitive cultural resources that exist in the peninsula. Again, the study provides in the report, when you have the opportunity to look at the report, provides a body of recommended strategies. It's a variety of actions. We talked about communication, enhancing partnerships. There are funding strategies. This study documents opportunities to go after particular federal grant programs related to resiliency, such as the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, the FEMA BRIC grant, and the Defense Critical Infrastructure Program, which is funded out of the Department of Defense. So there are a number of federal funding opportunities come out of this, and then obviously our recommendations across the board for greater information sharing and collaboration. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, the whole point is to preserve the value of the military presence, but from an economic impact, preserving that economic impact, as well as preserving the military installation's mission to sustain that military mission into the future, so that the DoD doesn't have to pick up and move an activity or close down installation, such as happened with Fort Ord in the 90s with the base closures. So that you want to, if you want to preserve what you have and you want to guard the future and protect against the future, and you really could start at the bottom here. You know, the more you can facilitate the communication, the better for achieving those ends. There were 76 strategies that we identified for the North County, and addressed all these particular methods. Again, with any particular finding, and I'm remiss to say that we not only documented issues as findings, but we also documented and promoted best practices, because we did note a number of best practices throughout the county, particularly with the fire chiefs regional standing forum and communication meetings that they host, and that leads to greater interagency training, resource sharing that cuts both, that blends both the military fire departments as well as the community fire departments, so that they share and benefit from their combined resources. In the South area, as I said, we did look at those more operationally training issues with Fort Hunter, Liggett, and Camp Roberts. And there are a number of good partnerships that have started with King City and Paso Robles with their neighboring military bases. In the South County, not so many findings. A number of reasons for that. One is there's a good set of communication, ongoing standing communication, and two, the rural nature of that South County and the distance between Fort Hunter, Liggett, and nearby communities, and Camp Roberts and King City, or Paso Robles, is that distance and geography provides, it enhances the compatibility, if you will. So they benefit from that. We identified 54 strategies down there. A few more traditional policy type recommendations. But in some, we delivered all of this body of information in a comprehensive report that breaks down the elements in a very straightforward manner. It's a nice primer if you're a new military installation commander, new to California and new to Monterey. It's a good one source document to inform you of what's going on in the surrounding communities and how it applies to your military base. And then if you're new to government in the defense communities, such as the new council members that are on board, it helps give you a one document resource that kind of gives you a broad-based look at all the policies and regulatory framework, as well as compatibility issues and challenges that are out there, and things for consideration moving forward. So right now we're completed the first step, which was to present the study and receive the presentation. We're looking forward to working with Hans and Kim on closing out the grant and meeting all the OLDCC deliverables. And then Matrix stands ready to assist in the pursuit of any future compatible use implementation ideas or actions in the future. And with that, and subject to your questions.
I just have a couple quick comments. I first of all want to recognize Marlena Brown from Naval Support Activity Monterey is here in the audience and was a key partner to us during this project, as well as Bob Geedy from the U.S. Army. And this was a real opportunity for local planners to meet military planners and to have the opportunity to dialogue about concerns on both sides of the fence and to open that conversation to the community and to stakeholders to obtain input. A couple lessons learned for me. I actually had the opportunity to go down to the community adjacent at Lockwood. There's a community center by Fort Hunter Liggett. We had Aaron Harwain, another project manager that helped us. We went down, we met with about 50 different citizens, and their clear message in South County is they're concerned about Halone Road. And then you heard mention of the tank trail. It's a critical safety issue that needs to be resolved going forward, and dialogue with King City, Paso Robles, and county supervisors helped us identify that as an issue that needs to be resolved. In the North County area, we were able to strengthen our relationships with our fellow planners. I would characterize it as more traditional planning issues that because they're basically schools. We've got the DLI, we've got the Naval and the Naval Postgraduate School. They do have some operational function, but it's not like what's happening in South County with tanks and huge training sessions. And our issues in North County are much closer to what we hear on a daily basis. Concerns about housing, concerns about water supply, and traffic and access around the peninsula. So it was a great opportunity to work with the Matrix team. I want to thank them. I want to thank my partners at the U.S. Army and the Naval Support Activity Monterey. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, and I don't want to prolong it too much, but I want to also share with you that we started off this study just thinking about the city of Monterey and the military installations here in the city of Monterey. That was our original start of it. And I want to thank Bob Geedy, who from the U.S. Army, who is a planner over there, who actually allowed us, together with Bob, we got the grant, but then Bob agreed to allow us to extend the scope of it to include the whole county, because again, the mayor is one of those folks that always speak about regional and think regional, and so it made sense to just expand it regionally. And then we discovered that we needed to split it up into the North and South County. And Kim is right, Holon Road is one of those direct elements right now that we are dealing with. The county is actually preparing one of those projects now that will qualify for defense, for the DSIP funds, which is a Defense Community Infrastructure Program. And also what happened was, just to put some practice into all those strategies here, we connected with Assembly Member Addis when she was just absolutely fresh in the office, told her about this compatibility use study and spoke about state of California needs to find matching funds for DSIP in order to also support projects such as Holon Road. And she became a co-sponsor of a bipartisan bill that is still alive and well in the state capitol right now to help set up those programs. So now who will read all that? It's probably not good night reading for most of us. But it is something that planners will look at, and planners will get a new dimension for their thinking. It is, as you could tell, written by planners for planner use, and you also see when you start looking and drilling down, what do we understand under air quality? To what level do we have to recognize it? It goes down in very detailed places and leads you to consider all those different factors. And it's I believe a great project that was done our consultant Larry spoke briefly about one of the effects of the preservation of the economic engine. Compatibility use studies are always very helpful for situations when the Department of Defense is looking at coming up with measures that will reduce the cost of military installation. And there I see that Malina from the Navy is obligated now to close her ears because I use the B word, brag. But it is base realignment and closure stands for brag. But it is one of those things where a study like that becomes an immensely handy for all the parties who are looking at what value do military installations have for certain regions. So that also is a very important side effect of having this study on the shelf. Last but not least, we reached out to many stakeholders, and I was very worried that we forgot CSUMB, but we looked at it as well. Dr. Barber, before you ask that question. Last but not least, I'm like the mayor, one more. I had a chance to brief the Governor's Military Council of that. Aaron Haraway and Kim were so kind to drop me the slides that I could then pretend they were mine. And they were very impressed with this, and everyone was absolutely thrilled until the chairperson, Vice Admiral Breckenridge, asked me if we consulted with the United States Coast Guard. And I told her honestly, no, we didn't. And that kind of took a little bit the air out of my hot air balloon that I was presenting to them, but I wanted to share this with you.
You could have left that last part off. So I'll ask the council if everybody would be okay if we maybe take it out to public comment first, and then we can come back for questions and comments. Does that sound good? All right, let's take it out to the public. Anybody wish to speak on this item?
Good evening, council members and staff. Thank you for your time and diligence as always. My name is Adam Pinteritz. I'm the Government and Community Affairs Director for the Monterey County Association of Realtors. It's not every day that we get explicitly mentioned as a stakeholder group that should be included in ongoing collaboration. So I'm here reporting for duty. I just want to share a couple of highlights or feedback regarding some of the strategies and ideas that were not presented tonight, but were in the very thorough report. Regarding, and I'm going to get a little repetitive with section names here, but HA subsections 1A, 1B, and 1C, we generally agree and support the idea of more workforce housing. So those sound like some excellent strategy ideas. For section HA 3B, we're happy to establish a collaborative relationship and receive information about housing services for military personnel in order to better serve them and the general public in finding housing solutions. My contact information is available at mcar.com if there's any further follow-up needed for that. Regarding section LU 1B, 1C, and 1D, we understand and accept that planning ahead to avoid encroachment issues may be necessary. However, we would be concerned about any changes that limit the future development of much needed housing. So, for example, when we have military installations right here in Monterey that might be up close to areas where we want to develop housing, I would not want that to become an issue. Regarding section RE 4A, 5A, 6A, and section WQQ 1A and 2C, we agree with and support all efforts to increase water supply and availability, particularly as the recommendations say, to the point of redundancy. Water should not be an issue in developing more housing, and we should be pursuing every avenue we can to get more of it. And then moving on to the South County strategies, sorry, everything I just said was North County strategies. In the South County strategies, section HA 1A and 2A, again, we support increased communication and collaboration to better meet regional housing needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Anybody else in the chamber wish to speak on this item? All right, let's take it online, please.
First, I'll call in Esther Malkin.
Good evening. I'm speaking as the founder of Monterey County Renters United right now. And I did attend a couple of these. I actually forgot about this. It's been so long. But over the course of having attended that and till now, even recently, I had mentioned to some people that in this report, at least what the parts of the meetings that I attended, there was the statement or the reference that the military does not have an effect on our local housing stock. And at the time when it was brought up, I questioned it and I still question it. And, you know, there's multiple ways to gather data, multiple ways to interpret data. And I'm sorry, but I don't care how they came up with their numbers. We all know that have been living here for decades that housing is directly affected by the military in a number of ways, not just in the number of units, but them getting preference over locals. When they apply for units, they are prioritized, and there are even areas and landlords and that will specifically only publicize available units to them. And I know this because I've had neighbors that did that. So that's one thing that you know, I want to make sure is understood out there, because there's not anybody that I've talked to since I heard that comment in these presentations that agreed with it, because it's just such an obvious thing. And I'm sure everybody on the city council has heard it over the years. The military definitely affects our housing stock. And I will also say that it would, you know, I'm happy to hear that they're interested in, you know, in acknowledging the fact that we have a water problem, but it would be really nice for them to help us out with it, like maybe creating a desal plant, you know, or doing some other, you know, form of water projects that might be innovative that locally we wouldn't be doing. So, you know, we all appreciate the military very much, and we know that we have to have them here. So we definitely want to partner with them, but we want to be realistic about the facts, especially when it comes down to rental units, when they are so transient when they come here, and we all are here much longer term. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next we have, I believe this is Ms. Beatty.
This is Nina Beatty. Mayor Williamson, you did not recuse yourself tonight. You work for the Naval Postgraduate School and have a conflict of interest. This was always a plan, not a study, and implementation is wanted in a very short time frame. And this is just the public version, not the full version. The study violated the terms of the RFP that required public involvement, and it did not include the public for most of the progress of creating it. This is a bias study. It's the military's point of view to protect military facilities is the goal. The communication and coordination groups are already taking place, and there's no need for formalized chartered regional working groups to embed the local communities with the military. The goal of DoD and county and the military council in the cities is to protect, sustain, and expand military facilities and missions, but that's not an objective requirement. That's not a neutral stance. The convergence of military and civilian in schools, business, community, planning, city and county officials is evident in this document. And the Defense Alliance is the only source of the economic benefit numbers. The claims of billions. I'm sure Camp Lejeune also claims to bring in billions to their community, but how many billions and billions in cost? There's no accounting of the costs. The impacts from the military here, it's as if we're just a nice, happy family here between the military and the communities. And there's no mention of the price of, for an instance, of an aquifer and the damage that's done in Hawaii, Hunters Point, Treasure Island, the Farallon Islands, all the places and all the military Superfund sites, including right here. The military wants to take water from our community while it destroyed the wells at Fort Ord. It poisoned the water, contaminated the Seaside Basin and Marina and the wells in the Salinas Valley, and the plume is moving towards Salinas and the agriculture, causing cancers, disease, and death. It's likely contaminated South County aquifers, and it lectures us on conservation. It wants more housing. It claims the military isn't creating a shortage here and it wants our help. And the jobs, the temporary licensing for spouses creates also a problem with jobs here. What about the military's costly impacts on this community? There has been lasting damage, injuries, illness, and death to residents and soldiers, and destruction to nature and our water. The study does not include this. We have harassment of wildlife in South County, not mentioned. The PFAS, forever chemicals in the drinking water, the Fort Ord prescribed burns that release these toxins into the air, the chemical weapons from World War I and World War II and onward that have been here in Fort Ord in South County, the depleted uranium, the white phosphorus, the Agent Orange, the PFAS compounds, the toxic herbicides that Fort Ord dumps shells and munitions in the bay and won't clean it up. And they won't clean up the radioactive and chemical weapons at Salinas Airport and the radioactive contamination in Naval Postgraduate School, which.
Thank you. Your time is up. And our next speaker is Kevin Dayton.
Hello, Kevin Dayton, Government Affairs Liaison for the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to thank the City Council for the latest effort to analyze how we can keep the military bases in the area, looking at possible conflicts with land use and resolving those. We sent out today from the Chamber of Commerce our prosperity update. We had links to 5 studies that have been done since 2016 about the economic benefits of the military bases and why we should do all we can as a city to keep them here. We also tweeted those out as well. I'll actually email those to the City Council so that you can take a look at the studies. I'm collecting all of these in a folder so that we do have some people in the community who don't like the military bases, think they're a negative impact. And we have plenty of information for you to look at as you consider those comments. The Chamber of Commerce does not believe that those comments are well-grounded. Thank you very much.
There are no further hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council for questions, comments. Start us off. I see Gino's hand up.
Thank you, Larry, for the presentation. And thank you, city staff and everyone else who was involved in the study. Really interesting information. I have a couple questions and a comment. I'm sorry if I missed this information in the study, but was there any information regarding, I guess this kind of goes along the same lines of CSUMB, any information about the impact to the local school system?
Councilmember Garcia, thank you so much for the question. That was not a particular issue. There was no significant issue raised during the interview, stakeholder engagement in the public participation process. We did look at childcare. That was raised, the need for greater childcare facilities and access to childcare facilities off installation. The facilities on installation are okay. But the childcare also having amplifying the service of childcare is not only a benefit for military mission sustainment, especially with multiple families that are both the husband and wife are serving, or single parents that are serving. That's a critical need that has to be maintained. There are some opportunities to improve that, but that service also would enhance the workforce that work in the city of Monterey and other jurisdictions, communities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I think that information would have been really interesting to see. Being a father of school-age children, Actually, when I was visiting a school that's heavily attended by military children or children from military families, in speaking with staff, there was a detail that came up that for me was pretty new to hear, that given that families or the transient nature, right, of families being in the area for like 2 years and then being deployed somewhere else, these students get pulled sometimes from school mid-year. So I'd be interested to understand what that does for like the PPA allocation and all that for not only the schools themselves, but the district in general. And my next question, does the study, going back to the point about the nature of military families, right, being in the area only for a very specific period of time, does the study show what kind of impact that in itself has to the city?
Councilmember Garcia, no, sir, there was no particular look at that, what you're describing. We did note the incidence of student turnover, particularly with the Defense Language Institute, but we did not look into an issue involving the effects of high turnover rates for military personnel as students. Some of the issues that you raised in your prior question, as a graduate of the Defense Language Institute myself, and having gone through that, and living in Pacific Grove and having to take my son in and out of school, that had a particular impact on my family. So I very much empathize with that point, but we did not, that was not a particular issue that was raised or investigated or researched during this study.
Okay. And just lastly, a comment, and it's echoing a comment that we heard during public comment from Esther Malkin. I've also experienced something similar where some of my neighbors are also military. It's kind of a interesting experience in that we get to meet folks from all over the world, tend to be, very friendly and great, warm families. But then the downside to that is that they leave in 2 years. So we build, relationships with these folks who come into the area and then they take off, right? So just wanted to kind of echo what the comment that was shared. And I think that does something, of course, to housing supply, but it also does something to the cohesion of the community itself. So I'll just, not necessarily a question, but just something that I wanted to put out there. So thank you, Larry.
Mr. Mayor, if I just may add a little bit more to Larry's answer. So a compatibility use study is a preliminary land use study. It looks at encroachment issues. It looks at all the factors that are playing a role into that. When you talked about the school issue, which is a very, very important topic for many of us. High school students come and the varsity teams are formed and they have no shot at getting into varsity teams or JV teams, etc. What this study does to a degree is it enhances communication and builds bridge building. But what we also have in place for many years now here in Monterey is basically a good partnership between the MPUSD leadership as well as the local garrison and the local Navy base commander. And those three, from time to time, with the help of the city, they are talking about those issues. They are talking about having the students ripped out of their school years or having integration challenges. They're talking about STEM programs already full when very capable students come, and how can we tackle that? So I would fail our existing system, not to mention it, that MPUSD deal, the Presidio of Monterey as Naval Support Activity Monterey Bay, communicating on those topics. The military impact on housing is definitely there. I asked somebody at HCD actually last year as part of a summit in Sacramento, what is the impact of rent prices having military in a community? The answer was zero. There's no evidence that military influences anywhere rental prices in the state of California. That was the answer from HCD. Take it for what it's worth, but I wanted to share this with you as well. Lastly, and not least, every military student that is your neighbor and comes to the schools comes with a certain amount of money that is being provided to train that student. They are a immense factor in the planning for somebody like PK Diffenbach when they plan out their school years, because again, those military students are also quote unquote economic factor, which allows schools to operate and hire teachers and keep them engaged throughout the year. So these are also part of the benefits, and I just wanted to address your excellent questions. And yes, there are some of those collaborations, including healthcare. You know, how do we get child psychologists? It's a question that the military has, but that also we as a community have. How do we deal with mental health challenges? They come and amplify those challenges as well, and we are dealing with those questions also.
If I may echo Hans's comments, we find I have direct experience working with the Council of Government here in San Antonio, where you have habitual standing communication forums that bring in all parties. They may start off as compatibility, predominantly land planning type of issues, but a standing communication forum that's multilateral in terms of multilateral governments, you know, school districts, water districts, utility providers, local governments, state agencies. When you bring multiple governing parties together with the military installations in the forum, it leads to ancillary spin-off strategies, if you will. One particular, the spousal licensure or the recognition of spousal licensing, professional licensing, is an evolution of compatibility planning that spun off and then took off on its own and it went nationwide. And so absolutely, there are greater benefits to be had than through standing formalized communications that involve multiple jurisdictions.
Councilmember Hoppe. Yeah, thank you very much for the report. I did want to follow up on a couple of things, especially relating to, I mean, as I'm listening to you, kind of the big outcomes in terms of strategies and issues we need to address that I heard were housing, water, traffic access. So with respect to water, was there any conversation with the leadership at the installations or the Department of Defense? Are they interested and open in developing water sources to serve their installations, whether that might be, for example, purification of the water from the lake that's on Naval Postgrad, or possibly developing their own small desal? Is that something that was discussed? Is that something that they're open to having conversations with us about?
Yes, those issues were discussed and engaged upon, predominantly with a focus of providing redundant capacity to sustain military installation requirements in the event of a regional outage. So that would be looking at not only the availability of potable water, continuance of wastewater, being able to provide local power or microgrids, emergency communications. The desal, in particular, is looked at. There might be interest. We can't speak for the Department of Defense, but as a whole, the Department of Defense is interested in resiliency of its installation and is interested in funding technologies or methods to provide those redundancies. Small scale desal potentially could be an option, but it would take an impact study to look at that. You've had a lot of extensive environmental impact assessments for large scale desal, and then recently had the clearance to go ahead with pursuing amended desal operations that are more or less environmentally impactful. So yes, it's open, but it would take starter conversations and extensive development of that. Purifying the lake water on the postgraduate school, that you could do that in an emergency situation, and we have technologies to do that, but that is not a large water supply. So we also looked at the issue of if military installations if they have resiliency built in, that in an emergent situation such as an evacuation for severe storm impacts, wildland fire impacts to the peninsula, potentially those redundant capabilities of military installations could be feed emergency power to police stations and fire stations to help maintain a redundant capacity for emergency services. But again, that's a very high level, very preliminary discussions, but yes, a lot of those issues were kicked around, so to speak.
And with respect to housing, my recollection is maybe 10, 15 years ago, that the Presidio built quite a bit of very nice housing for their defense employees out along Aguajita Road, and just past the courthouse. And I'm wondering if there is discussion, and this kind of speaks to the issue of workforce housing. Are there plans in the works to build more? And what's their view on that as being part of this solution to the housing challenge?
Well, Councilman, I'm not sure who you're specifically referring to. What's their opinion?
I'm talking about like the folks from the defense community, the installations, our military partners.
We had those conversations. We recommended that the consultants recognize the opportunity that the Ord military community and the lands of the former Fort Ord provide in terms of potentially being an area that could be developed for workforce housing. There's an issue with the government housing there is got a high occupancy rate. It is cascaded down in terms of the offering. We recognize the potential for enhanced development, but it's a bigger issue than local issue, because that particular area is tied up with the whole Department of Defense housing privatization problem. And so there are long-term agreements into place. But certainly as a conversation starter, I think the military would be open to conversation, but I can't speak for what their position is going to be on yes or no on something that's being proposed. That'd be require further conversation.
Yeah, I would just offer, I tend to be persuaded by Esther Malkin. I do think that there is an impact on sort of housing affordability in the area, and that building more workforce housing would sort of be the most efficient and effective way to address it. But my last question has to do with, I didn't hear about the Monterey model. And so as you no doubt know, the city of Monterey partners with our military installations to provide services that we're able to provide more efficiently and help save them money. And it's a way for us to provide a service and hopefully keep those installations here. So what is there any sort of new information about that, new ideas that came up about how we can strengthen or augment the Monterey model, or any challenges or issues that were raised about it?
Well, as you know, with the city of Monterey, I mean, that is a very healthy partnership in the Monterey model. Fred Muir helped, and Hans helped pioneer that effort. And that Monterey model's been, like I said earlier, has been exported nationally. You know, so it's very well developed. There are probably some opportunities to squeeze out more. And with regard to DoD and service policy, they pretty much are open to any innovative solution that would help reduce cost and burden sharing. We did have an extensive conversation about intergovernmental support agreements with King City and Paso Robles. And so that conversation sparked conversations with Fort Hunter, Liggett, and Camp Roberts, in particular, opening IGSAs. Fort Hunter, Liggett, and King City have a partnership with the intermodal rail station that's going to be that has gone to project design, and that's part of their partnership. Partnering has brought that to fruition, that that railway transportation terminal will be designed to handle not only passenger traffic but also freight and vehicle traffic, and offer an intermodal capacity that would support the movement of military vehicles. And there was discussion of potentially operationalizing city management of wastewater treatment on Fort Hunter Liggett. And so that South County has a lot of opportunity for improving the Monterey, or applying the Monterey model down there. I would say in the North County, there's still opportunity, but it's fairly mature.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I may just add a few more things that Larry might overlook. April 21st, I just looked the date up. I'm not that great, but the Army just completed a housing project and opened 108 new housing homes out at Fort Ord. That was an $80 million project. And it added necessary housing onto Fort Ord. And we were a little bit helpful there as well, because PG&E couldn't fire it up on time. And the unit stood longer empty than they should have. And we were able to help a little bit with communicating with PG&E that this brings relief for our own housing market. Now, if you take 108 enlisted and officers off the market and let them live in $80 million new homes, that helps. What also is taking place is that the garrison commanders that have been here for the past 2-3 cycles understand that as long as they have vacancies in their housing units, they don't want their enlisted to live off base. And what you see there also is a very strict adherence now to certain standards that has increased the vacancy rates on military housing to almost nil. So again, there were times when they had maybe a vacancy rate of 10 to 20% in their own housing units. That might have been 6, 7, 8 years ago. But again, understanding the housing market, the garrison commanders are really drilling their teams now, and Bob can confirm that, to not live off base if there are housing, if there's housing available in their own backyards, like La Mesa housing, but also out at Fort Ord. And also out at Fort Ord is also, I believe, a contingent of Navy housing as well. Or do I get this right? Is it just Army housing there? No, I mean out in Fort Ord, I think there's also, anyways, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, you have this residential community initiative that replenished the whole housing stock with brand new housing, but the Army is still pressing forward in taking older buildings, barracks, older buildings out and building new stuff. And I just remember, Ellen, you remember that from Fora when we were sitting there.
That's great. So it sounds like they are taking some positive steps in that regard. Great.
Okay. I think I saw Dr. Barber's hand go up first.
So thank you for all this information. It's great. I understand the purpose was for the land use, and I think it's wonderful, especially at this time of having to deal with the housing elements as well as water and so many other things. And I'm hoping that we're just not gonna sit it on the shelf and let it collect dust. I think it's some valuable information here that can be utilized, like a lot that's been brought up already this evening, dealing with HA1, talking about the perception in the community, the military basic housing allowances impacts the local housing market. So I am understanding that when you have found these different issues, that there's some supportive documentation that goes with this. Is that correct?
Yes, to the best of our ability.
Okay, so is that also in the report as well?
Yeah, where we have substantiating evidence, we provide them.
Okay, because I would be curious about that particular one. And then also it talks about the education part that was brought up earlier by Council Member Garcia in HA 5, saying the education in the North County study area can impact quality of life and thus impact retention and recruitment. And then it talks about some other ways, because in higher ed right now, retention and recruitment is a big button item across not only here regionally, but also nationally. And it talks about some different ways to address that as well. Then in RE3, it talks about the erosion and sea level rise that can lead to coastal flooding. And it talks about how some of the suggested strategies are to identify a project for FEMA, the BRIC grant funding. So a lot of these different strategies, I would hate to sit on the shelf, but I feel like in COM1, that could be remedied because it says there's no formally established or routine communication forum between the military installations and surrounding communities. But then it talks about how in COM1A, the region should consider establishing a regional working group and/or ask local communities to monitor CUS implementation and address future compatibility findings that may arise within Monterey Bay. So I just think that the communication part would be a good place to start to be able to move some of these points and strategies forward. So it's not just a nice project or a nice finding, a nice data piece that sits on a shelf. But I think a lot of these bring up a lot of information that could be helpful and useful in some of the community concerns. So I don't know what that looks like or where you go from here, or whether that's a question for you or for Hans or whoever, but how could we implement more of some of the strategies that you're looking at here in the study, particularly the ones that I just spoke about?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Barber, I couldn't agree more. If the city of Monterey were to chart a course to take leadership to establish continued leadership, because you've already just demonstrated leadership with this, sponsoring this project. If the city would like to take the next leadership step forward, taking the lead on establishment of a implementation working group or an implementation committee or some form or body, creating a charter, establishing, inviting stakeholders to be participants in the forum or the committee, get that established, and then select, as one of the first order of business is select what are the key concerns and the key areas to focus on. Recommendations would be housing, water, public safety in terms of wildland firefighting capacity. But there are a number of things that we have identified in the implementation chapter that are higher priority and short term to midterm recommendations. So we would recommend that you establish formalized committee, stand it up, select the high priority issues, endorse those issues, and set an agenda to move forward.
Okay, so I appreciate that. So Hans, that's something that we can be able to move forward and talk more about, or what does that look like in action?
Yeah, so on June 29th, we have invited as the city all local military leaders, and also we will invite also city managers and mayors to join us in the conference center, where we have actually a meeting where we will bring them all together, talking at the table, and we'll work out during a 4-hour session, hopefully, what are the main topics that we want to continue talking about it. That's planned for June 29th. This Friday, Councilmember Panetta is hosting something that dates way back. It's called Team Monterey. It will be hosted, I believe, on Friday, if I remember correctly, out at the DLI. This will be also an opportunity for us, meaning for the city of Monterey, to talk about that, present it to the assembled military leadership and the congressman, and promote this continuing working group that Matrix and our consultants are proposing, to basically build up on those working groups that we have and institute them in a formalized way. So the first step we have on Friday, and on the 29th, we have already printed out the program, and we will push this out. I wanted to do it actually sometime today, but we'll push it out by the end of this week.
Okay, so I can be able to get that information afterwards, like sometime this week.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Since it's a draft, I want to give some feedback, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for your fine report. What's very helpful is the first section, issues and potential strategies. So it's kind of a snapshot and gives us some focus. So one of the areas that's already been mentioned by Council Lady Kim Barber, I appreciate that, was COM2, where it's talking about the formalized protocol for coordination between military installations. And I noted that that was also a comment for both North and South areas. So the common need for communications, and obviously post-COVID, we have an opportunity to advance the ball. I remember formerly the city of Monterey used to have an annual session. Hans, maybe you still do this at the operational level with the base commander and city manager, police chief, fire chief. Has that been occurring at all since maybe before COVID, but nothing after? Formally, that would happen. The garrison commander would organize that, invite everybody, and it would be all the city mayors, city managers, and that was an annual thing. So that's almost at an operational level. But
so when you said police chiefs, that threw me off. We have those meetings.
Okay.
They are conducted by right now just by the Defense Language Institute and the Garrison Commander,
Okay.
not by the Navy.
Okay.
But those meetings are still there, and I know I think, Mayor, you attended, I believe, at least one. Mayor Oglesby is always there. I try to attend always as well. So
Yeah.
city managers are there. So those meetings with the DLI take place still.
Right. So I wanted to call and make this connection, but it sounds like you have a plan to maybe take that to the next level. So that's good to hear, that we can really take that to the next level. I wanted to call attention to LU1, I believe it is, where it's talking about growth surrounding communities and land use, with the recommendation of LU1A was to update the airport land use. So a question, since we don't do the land use, how would we move this, or how would city manager move this to execute this suggestion for the Monterey County Land Use Authority? We copy this report and send it off, and it's up to them, but I'd like to hear more about that.
I think that Larry is probably perfectly prepared to answer that question, Larry, since it's in your report.
I knew Larry would wanna
I
jump
wouldn't
on that.
know how to answer that, Councilmember, right now. No.
You know, it's all about political will and motivation at the end of the day. And so again, the report, in and of itself can't move mountains. It can influence actions, and the actions have to be owned by an entity. You need a champion to move things forward. With regard to equity with the county, somebody at the county would have to take that ownership and equity to move, to agree to it, number one, and two, to move it along. That could be a catalyst, could be this June 29th, bringing everyone together that Hans was describing. That could be the catalyst for the conversation. Hey, what do you guys think about this? Would you be willing to move it along? Is this something you could take on? You know, throughout that implementation strategy, we provide our best recommendation on principal agencies and partnering agencies, or principal organizations and partnering organizations. And so it's not always a perfect match, but whoever owns this, the remedy is really the entity that has to own it. In working with projects where you have no champions and you have no local government that is willing to take on the cause, you get no movement. So it's really about building the consensus to move something.
Well, it's in the report, and we appreciate it. And certainly members of the Monterey Airport Board will have an opportunity to read this and have discussions, and hopefully they join the collaborative session the city manager's already mentioned. On PT1, it talks about trespassing at the NSA, Monterey, and OMC, and it's a concern. So I just want to highlight this, that because it's security fencing, the need for signage, I'm sure our staff will be sharing this with the appropriate people, with the Department of Defense. But that has always been and has been a long-standing point of vulnerability for the military bases, being smack dab in the middle of surrounding cities. And so just don't want to see that gets lost or disappears. That would be a priority for me, to be able to highlight that, and that be at the forefront of conversations with the Admiral at the Naval Postgraduate School and the Garrison Commander as well. I want to move ahead for time to RE1. RE1 is the next section. There is a concern about the potential risk from wildland fires in North County study session. So those that are listening to us, North County is typically referred to as something off of the peninsula in Prunedale, Castroville. So in this particular case, we are talking about this study, and we are within the North County area. The peninsula is the North County area. South County is, as you had indicated, Fort Hunter Liggett. So within this North County study area, it talks about open space. Is something missing from this section? because it seems like that's not saying enough. And I know this is a draft, so I want to call the attention to, there's no period there, and it seems like that's not the whole sentence. I don't need an answer, just wanted to focus in on this matrix. There might be something missing there. Also on RE1, there is, let's see, oh, I'm sorry, PS. PS, and maybe I've passed it here. It's got some information that is also missing in this narrative. So if you would just go back and look at that, and there's some cutoff, and maybe when you were doing this, loading it into these text boxes, something got missed, and that was under the PS Palm Police Facility at OMC. May not be an optimal location. So there's a paragraph, it's just incomplete on packet page 203.
It's PS3.
Is it PS3? Okay. So something's missing in that text. I'm sure it was a wonderful paragraph, and we'll assume this is a draft. That's why we do this.
Which package page is that?
It's packet page 203. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, packet page 2. Let's see. Well, it's in the text box where it's talking about it's PS3. I just hit one button and it's jumped, and I'm way off now. So it's just, it stops with create, but doesn't finish the
It's
word.
the page before we get to table 2.
Say it again, page before?
The page prior to the page that starts with table 2 on it that talks about South County. So if you
Okay.
go to table 2 with South County, go back a page, and it's PS3.
Okay.
But all that
yeah,
to say,
Yeah, that's it's a draft. We appreciate that. Good information. And I would just say that well, no, that's the only question I have. I'll pass it on to others. Thank you.
awesome. I meant to ask this when we came out of public comment, Karen, but I just was hoping that maybe we could clarify the comment that was made during public comment about me having to recuse myself.
Yeah, legally, you did not have to recuse yourself. This was just a presentation item with no decisions being made. So there was no financial interest involved since no decisions are up before you.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that
Mhm.
clarification. As a way to start, I would say that when I was sworn in as the mayor in December, I had asked the president of MPS to do that, and she had agreed to. And part of the reason why I had asked my boss, in a way, to do that is because of how important the military installations are to our region. And I think that the presentation had given more details in regards to the economic impact. But I would go further and say that there is historical and cultural relevancy for the military installations that are established here. And growing up as a military, I want to say brat because that's what I'm used to saying, but somebody told me I shouldn't use the word brat because it's condescending. But I was a military brat. But military families, are really important, and they live a kind of certain existence where, I moved to several different places and maybe not always feeling accepted, but always having this military community where you would see people that you met from several military bases ago. And they're most part going to communities where the local community has been very supportive. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we create an environment where our military families feel supported, and that there's not a finger being pointed at them as if they're the problem in our community, but also recognizing where the problems do exist, and how things like the compatibility use study really shine a light on how we can find a roadmap towards addressing where some of those tensions are, so that we can help make sure that our military families can do the job and the mission that they're tasked with doing. and that there's not too much impact on the local community so that they can be supportive, which I think naturally they want to be. So just as a primer for a few of the comments that I'll make here. My colleagues have indicated this. I think it's important that we focus on establishing a working group for the deeper collaboration between the military installations and the surrounding communities. So I don't know what that looks like. The thing that I think about, particularly as mayor now, is overwhelming our staff. And I know that there is so much work to be done in the city of Monterey, but given my preamble, I think that amongst those priorities needs to be the collaboration with our military installations. So I hope that we can find a way in there to look at what the priorities look like. And I think June 29th meeting seems like a great launch off from today's discussion. I want to dial in on the perceptions that are created in the community that the military BAH impacts the local housing market. One of the comments that Hans makes, and if folks are in the chamber and saw my facial expression when he talked about the HCD statement that there's zero impact to the cost of rentals, I find that hard to believe. But maybe there's something there that I don't fully understand or appreciate. The point that's made about that comment in the report says the perception, though. So that's particularly interesting to me, because, you know, how much of this is fact versus fiction, and how do we dispel that if there is a fiction part to that? How do we, again, help lower the temperature in their room around this? Obviously, housing is a huge issue in the region. And so people are very quick to point the finger at what the problems are. The problems are plenty. And if there's a way that we can work with our military partners to help lower the temperature in the room in regards to that, I think it's an important point of discussion that should be a priority. I'm trying to maybe not go through all these notes because I have a lot, but give me a second here. I'm particularly interested in what next steps look like to realize the potential strategies and ideas. And there were some examples given in the report around high density workforce housing, public and public-private partnerships for increased housing stock. When we talk about the high cost of housing overall, I particularly think it's important for us to think about it from the perspective of the military installations and how the high cost of living might impact their ability to be able to stay within this region. If they're having, I imagine if they're having to continue to allocate more and more funding for supporting the high cost of living here, it's a disincentive for the government to want to continue funding that here. So I feel like the military installations have a stake in the game in order to help find a way of stabilizing the cost of housing. And so really, again, I think just this kind of further highlights a reason for us to be partners and really take leadership with working with our military installations. And I've heard leaders from the military community talk about their interest and willingness to find a pathway forward. But I think it's really incumbent upon us to have the leadership in order to drive those conversations and really support that moving forward. There was another point that was made in the report about identifying opportunities for the tech industry and other related industry partners. I'm interested in seeing what that looks like. That's particularly exciting because one of the issues that we have when we're talking about housing is creating affordable housing. Well, if we were able to create more jobs that paid a living wage or medium to high wage jobs, we wouldn't have to worry about really creating subsidized housing in the region as much. So I'm really interested in hearing more about where those opportunities are to create more jobs within the region. I'm going to switch over to water. Alan brought this up earlier on the topic of Lake Del Monte and where there are opportunities to further that. Larry, you had indicated earlier that it wouldn't provide a substantial amount of water. We just talked about at our last council meeting, a project that we're moving forward on to take water from Lake El Estero and put that in the system for Monterey One Water to recycle that. I imagine that that water amount is greater than what we would get out of Lake Del Monte, but I wonder if there's ever been a study done to determine what that watershed is and the potential water supply that could come out of that. And I would imagine that even if it's 50 acre feet or whatever it might be, that's 50 acre feet that we don't have now. So, and I imagine that the infrastructure would be relatively the same, maybe even easier than it would be for what we're planning to go into for Lake El Estero. And I think we were getting $1 million grant funding from the state in order to do that. So it seems like in the grand scheme of the military budget, a small dollar amount for a good economic benefit, easy economic benefit for the community. There was something in the report, and actually this is a question in regards to enacting defense reserve water rights. I'm wondering if somebody could speak to that.
That, Mr. Mayor, that came from Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, or Monterey One, maybe Monterey One. Yeah, it was Monterey One. So in theory, it is, the way I understand it, you can take the allocation and transfer it from one entity to another. Essentially, you would connect the pipes between the water purveyors, and then you would establish a credit and a meter at the point of transference, and you could allocate. You take, because you have on the peninsula, you have an area of have not and an area of have. So western side of the peninsula is generally lacking sufficient water rights, and the eastern side of the peninsula is generally has sufficient water to support development. Within that, the idea is that you can transfer water rights to the rights that are still vested with the Army in the former Fort Ord, and be able to transfer that water to where it's needed at the Presidio and the Naval Postgraduate School. They seem to think that this is very feasible, and that they could get around the policy constraints.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, that the defense community has water rights in as much as to be able to take water from the former Fort Ord, develop the infrastructure to put it into, let's say, CalAM's system, and utilize those water credits for their
own needs,
for projects within their jurisdiction.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
And I believe it's the Department of Army that actually owns the water rights. A lot of people attribute it to the Department of Defense, but I believe it's the Army that actually has the tangible property rights to that.
Okay. Okay. Public comment is closed. I would come to you. I would have to open it up for everybody. So, but maybe we can chat after. Just a few more bullets that I have here just to highlight. And again, my colleagues have indicated some of these things, but childcare services, we've heard a lot about that. We have our contract where we've had some issues with, we've heard of some issues with our ability to be able to provide enough childcare services. I hear about it all the time. And so that I think that is a critical issue for families across the region, that there's just not enough services. And we need to make sure that when young ones are getting older, that they have those services available, and to support parents that are in the workforce and that may not have the ability to stay at home with their kid. So anyways, I think that that's a particular point of interest. The education services, you know, I'm trying to be careful how I say things. I hear a lot of military families that come here and they move to Pacific Grove or Carmel to allow their kids to go to schools in those school systems, or they go to private schools, and that's essentially taking away the funding for Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. And so I think there's something that we need to chisel down here more on. And I'm not saying it's the military's problem in and of itself. I think it's part of a larger issue that exists with our school district. And we need to make sure that we're finding those solutions that help support our school district to be effective and start changing the direction that things seem to have been going in over the last several decades. And so that I appreciate, Gino, you bringing that up earlier, because I think that's a particularly important touch point that we need to drill down on more. There was a point raised about a well-coordinated mass evacuation plan. I hear this all the time from residents about their concern. You know, we heard about it during the winter storms, and you know, the atmospheric rivers potentially closing down the 68 and the 1, and us being locked in because of course then the 1 in Big Sur had mudslides. So anyways, I think that is a particularly important point for our community and our region. Traffic congestion is absolutely important for us to think about. I mean, that's kind of pretty much basic and fundamental to what we do here as a city service, is helping to mitigate those impacts. And I think that all major employers, which the Defense Language Institute and the Naval Postgraduate School are two of the largest employers in the city of Monterey, have a huge role to play in helping to mitigate traffic impacts in our region. And so how much work can we do as a city to have leadership in working with our military partners to advance our multimodal plan, and helping to find alternative modes of, that includes finding alternative modes of transportation, that includes maybe implementing a better strategy in regards to telework and workplace flexibility so that not everybody's coming to work on the same day. I'm just going to give a little bit of a quick story. I live on Franklin Street between Clay and High, and by, I want to say 7:15 every day, the traffic going to the Defense Language Institute is all the way down the hill. And it's bumper to bumper all the way up Franklin. And I mean, I'm just thinking about greenhouse gas emissions. That's just, my little take on it. But I've heard frustrations from people in the community around traffic impacts and people trying to take their kids to school or whatever that is. We need to do a better job collectively as a community to address the traffic congestion issue, especially particularly during rush hour. That's it. I'm done. Anybody else? I think we killed that one. I appreciate everybody's participation on this. Thanks to the whole Matrix team for taking lead in helping this, and thanks to city staff for your leadership and partnership on this, and to our military partners. And Aaron. Oh yes. Would that be okay as like a staff kind of yeah, Aaron, come on up. I'm excited for this.
You didn't just spill a cup of
precious water.
Gracious.
Aaron, can you describe your role again? I apologize if I missed this.
Sure. I'm Erin Harwain with Denise Staffing Associates. The city contracted with DD&A and did an solicitation as part of our on-call contract to hire a project manager to assist lovely Kim Cole over there with this workload. So it's been a pleasure to participate in this project. Been on since 2019. So happy to be here. And Larry, I just wanted to say, just in terms of that water agreement, the issue is a little confusing, but we met with Rem over at the general manager of Marina Coast Water District, and he had a really fascinating idea of, or theory, hypothesis about the federal water agreements. Now, we all know that Fort Ord's complicated, right? So to add to that, there is an Army allocation, and technically, I believe he said that the Presidio water and the Fort Ord water could be interchanged. And so what that would mean is if the Army was agreeable to it, any excess water that they didn't need for those installations could be used on the former Fort Ord for other jurisdictions, specifically City of Monterey, Fort Ord lands, for example. So there's a potential movement of water credits through these federal agreements when the base closed.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. And this is an important, I mean, it's a really important discussion point, obviously, as we're trying to figure out what does getting to the lifting of the cease and desist order look like. But between now and then, I think it's critical for us to think about innovative solutions. So I appreciate that update. Thanks again, everybody. We are going to move on.
You want to allow a 5-minute break, Mayor?
Oh,
I'm just saying we are going strong.
how long are we thinking that this next item is going to take?
If Henry doesn't talk, it can go fast.
I think let's chisel through, and then we could take a break after this next agenda item. So let's go to item number, this is public hearing, item number 16, Planning Commission's recommendation to allow modified uses at Del Monte Shopping Center. And I'll pass it to Hans for staff presentation.
Yeah, I lead it over to Chris. So this is in a nutshell, an agenda report that proposes to allow an additional use in our 912 Del Monte Shopping Center. And with that, Chris, and I said, Henry, when you were outside, it can go fast if Henry doesn't talk to me.
I'm glad that we repeated that when he was back in the room.
Well,
go ahead, Chris.
Well, thank you, Mr. City Manager. My name is Chris Schmidt. I'm a Senior Associate Planner for the City of Monterey, and I've been working with the applicant and property owners and potential tenants at the Del Monte Center for this application. And I have a fairly brief presentation. So what is the project? So our project description, the applicant has proposed to amend the Del Monte Center plan. This is a Del Monte Center SC plan, shopping center plan. It's the land use document for the shopping center. It was drafted, I think, initially in the early 60s and has been amended over time, more recently in 2009. What they're proposing, their proposed amendment here is to allow is a couple different pieces. So to allow up to 6,000 square feet of the total leasable area, which we'll get into on a following slide, to be used as office, business, and professional use as defined by the zoning ordinance. That's any sort of kind of commercial office use, basically medical office, commercial office. However, the plan doesn't actually allow that. I'll show that on a following slide as well. They're also proposing to revise the plan a bit, eliminating some uses that existed in the plan since it was created. So that includes laundromats, post offices, and the Christian Science reading rooms. And then the new uses and kind of the impetus for this project would be to specifically allow chiropractors as well as tax and financial services. So briefly, I mentioned the SC plan is the land use document. What it currently permits is uses that are allowed in the C2 zoning district, which is our community commercial district, with some specific modifications. Currently, doctors, lawyers, dentists, architects, and accountants are prohibited, and there's a specific prohibition under doctors for chiropractors and osteopaths. There are some other uses that are specifically allowed that are detailed in the staff report. Some of those are limited to 1 or 2 businesses at the shopping center. And then there are additional regulations, a use permit requirement for fast food service and outdoor farmers markets. And then I do also want to talk about why we're here, kind of the reasoning we have this application. So it's kind of two parts. So we have an applicant who's representing the property owner, which is a real estate investment trust. They have a portfolio of, I'd assume, similar properties, and they're publicly traded. And they're generally looking to diversify their business at this site. Initially, they had proposed 5% of the site be used for these uses. That was about 33,000 square feet. The staff generally did not want to support new office space since we have lots of office uses in our office space throughout the city. So this did go to the Planning Commission at 2 different meetings. The Planning Commission provided some suggestions, asked the applicant to come back with some revisions, and that's what you're seeing here today. So here, I think we all know where the shopping center is, but it is kind of bound by the north. It's at the north side of Highway 1 and adjacent to the Alta Mesa neighborhood and Monterey Avenue. And this site plan, which is obviously we're not able to read that here, but it shows that there are 83 existing retail and other various business suites ranging from 500 square feet to 200,000 square feet. The Macy's is that very large location. The plan actually did establish a maximum gross leasable area of 673,329 square feet. As I mentioned, the applicant started at a 5%. That's where we have that 33,600 square feet number, and applicant reduced to 6,000 square feet. What I haven't mentioned is the real reason they applied for this is we received a building permit at the end of last year for a new chiropractic office in a 950 square foot space. And unfortunately, I had to tell that person that this is not a use that is allowed after they had really gone through getting an architect and doing all the work to get it approved. And our building department flagged it and said, hey, is this allowed? And I found that it wasn't. And so on the one hand, we have the owners who have this goal of diversifying the use, but we do have a local born and raised chiropractor who wants to occupy that space. And I'm sure if you have questions for him, he can help answer those. So in terms of analysis,
while the slide's up there.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the staff.
Chris, let him ask the.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, through the mayor, your last slide. I
Yes.
want to make sure the math is right. It says the applicant reduced request to 6,000 square feet. Are you talking about the applicant of the Del Monte Shopping Center with their 5% GLA? They reduced the overall 33,600 square feet from their total gross.
Correct. So it would be a maximum of 6,000 square feet allocated for just professional office uses.
Okay, so just that segment of the profession.
Right.
Okay.
And I mean, the real difference here is these uses, doctors, lawyers, dentists, architects, and accountants would generally still be prohibited, with the exception that we're adding chiropractors are specifically allowed, as well as tax and financial services.
Okay.
So all those other uses are still prohibited for the most part. Some sort of other office could come in to occupy the space.
Okay, good. I just wanted to understand the math on that slide. Thank you.
So analysis. So the Planning Commission, in reviewing this project at 2 different hearings, found this was generally a minor change in land use and supported the amendment. Staff found that the amendment is consistent with our general plan policies and the C2 zoning district designation. So staff's recommendation today is to approve. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Are there any questions on the council? Councilmember
Question of
Smith.
the city attorney. It's close, Karen, and I'm wondering if you have the map that can tell me if I'm outside of the 500 feet of influence.
We can look it up. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sorry to stop it because I may have to recuse myself.
Yeah, we're pulling it up and we'll have that momentarily for you.
As I look at the map, I can see my house on the map. I think I'm outside of 500 feet, but
That's a good point. Any other questions while we're waiting for that? I know this is not what's in front of us, but just to kind of kill time while we're looking that up. What is the idea of using Del Monte Shopping Center, and how do the property owners feel about the use of that for housing construction?
There was really not a whole lot of discussion from the owners or applicant about that. I know the Planning Commission may have briefly floated the idea, but there was no specific discussion.
I'm just thinking about that parking garage that's there. I've never seen that parking garage full. I've never seen the parking lot full. Maybe on the south side of it, maybe, but on the north side, I've never seen that. And so I wonder how we might be able to expand some use of that space. Just speaking out loud while we're talking about the topic.
Yeah, it's not problem. It's probably a good idea, but it's not the topic to discuss.
Parking lot may
If
have
I
been
may
full
just play
during
city
Maverick
attorney here.
movie,
During Maverick?
during Maverick the movie.
Could we go to public comment maybe?
Yeah, let's go to public comment. Anybody on the public want to speak on this item? Oh, really quick, do we have a answer?
Yes, Councilmember Smith, you're you're in that range between 500 and 1,000 feet. Where to go through that, we would need to go through the multi-step analysis. So I would recommend, since we haven't had an opportunity to do that, that you recuse yourself in this instance. So recusal under FPPC rules requires you to leave the dais and leave the room for this item, and then we can call you back in for closed session.
That sounds perfect to me because I've heard Henry talk before.
Sorry, buddy. Shots fired. All right, we're gonna do a 2-minute timer. No.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Henry Runke. I'm with Wald Runke and Dost Architects. We've been the architects with Del Monte Center for many years. We've been working with American Assets, the owner, since they've purchased it about 20 years ago, and have been involved in many aspects of the improvements that American Assets has made to our shopping center over the last couple decades. I don't think that you want me to make a big, long presentation. I will just try to clarify that the amount of space that we're looking at is, as mentioned, 6,000 feet. It's less than 1% of the total shopping center size. When we also look at the vacancy rates and you look at many areas such as the former Macy's furniture area, that's very large space, that's vacant. Much of the former Mervyn's building is also vacant, and then there's vacancies throughout other areas of the shopping center that we're never going to get to a point where we're pushing against that 1%, where we're 99% full for a long time. And that's the one thing they would love would be to be 100% full, but this is really going to have no impact on anybody's economic viability as to sacrificing retail space for what would in this instance be a 950 square foot chiropractic office. The shopping center is going more toward a lifestyle center like many shopping centers, which means that you're seeing more restaurant, you're seeing people going there for entertainment. But there's also with the chiropractor, it's kind of a little different model. There's actually chiropractors going into shopping centers like this throughout the state. And they're actually the type that you don't have to make an appointment, you can drop in. And so it's really actually reinforces the shopping center and bringing people in versus dissuading people from wanting to come there and spend their money and create more tax revenue. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm here. I also have the manager of the shopping center, Ann Sierra. She's here also. She can answer some questions. And then I believe the potential tenant is also here tonight too. Thank you very much.
Anybody else want to speak on this item?
I waited 3 hours, so
If you told me that this was your item, I would have moved it up.
I'm
But
sorry.
I hope you learned something today.
I'm Joseph Davy. I'm the owner of the Joint Chiropractic in Salinas. It's a national franchise. My wife and I have been waiting like 7 to 8 months for this moment. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm a longtime resident of Monterey. The Joint Chiropractic is a great opportunity for military, for families that can just have a walk-in appointment, just come in, get some affordable chiropractic care. And that's something I would really enjoy and love to do for this community. And my wife's pregnant. She wanted me to tell you that. Just on the record. Okay. So just take that.
As long as you said so, I mean, I guess we're good.
At least she's blushing. But anyways, I just wanted to thank you guys for your time. But like I said, we've been waiting a long time for this moment, and again, the joint chiropractic is only going to help the mall, and it's only going to serve this community in the best possible way for affordable healthcare.
Awesome. Thank you for your patience in waiting for this moment to happen, and congratulations to both of you on the new member of your family soon to be. Hey, I wish we had balloons. The reveal. Anybody else? All right. Do we have anybody online?
No, no hands.
Okay. So we'll bring it back to the council for deliberation and a motion. Councilmember Hoffa?
So I'm supportive of the request, but I guess my question to staff is, and I understand the desire to kind of limit service-oriented businesses to some extent because of the relationship between retail businesses and sales tax revenue. But why limit this type of service to, let's say, I think it's tax preparation and or chiropractic. I can't remember if it also included acupuncture, but how is that different from accounting or doctor's offices, dentist offices? Like, why are we limited in this way? It seems a little artificial to me, but I'm wondering if there's some rationale.
Yeah, I think that the original plan was drafted that way with the intent that this would be a retail focused location. So even when the applicant applied, I think our staff actually did not want to support any expansion of service office type uses. In discussing at the planning commission hearings and understanding this is a very small space, reducing from 33,000 to 6,000 is a substantial reduction. And I think that the shopping center currently has more than 6,000 in vacant spaces. So it seemed like an opportunity for them to fill space, also provide additional services to the community. And I think also what I felt was important with this specific use is that it, as Dr. Davy said, it doesn't require, you don't need health insurance, and you pay, I think, a small subscription, and it's walk-in appointments. And so it seemed like similar to like the nail salon nearby, where you can come and do a walk-in and you pay a low fee, and then you go into the pet store next door or something to that effect.
Interesting.
Okay, that makes sense. So in theory, just anybody happening to go to the mall for any reason might decide that they want to have an adjustment or something, as opposed to something where
I think it'd be ready to go tomorrow for you.
Okay, I'm ready to make a motion, whatever everyone else is.
If you want to go ahead and make the motion. Okay, yeah.
So kind of piggybacking on Councilman Hoffa's okay, there you go.
That was planned. That was planned. Actually, you were on camera too, so everybody online saw that. Go back and watch the tape. Kind of get a workers' comp claim here.
So how does the manager of
You're back.
I'm sorry. So how does the manager of the mall, not mall, center feel about this opening up other potential occupants that would be similar to come and want to come into the center and changing the concept and scope of it?
Yeah, so initially, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, initially their proposal was to eliminate the prohibitions on the doctors' offices, dentists, architects, various professional office uses. I think at this point, they are focused on just this one tenant. I think that they like, as I mentioned earlier, are willing to or desiring to have some sort of further diversification of what allowed uses they can have on site. So I don't think that it is their intent to go and immediately fill, excuse me, the remaining 5,000 square feet with office uses. I think they are probably going to take whatever good tenants that they see. And if it's an office use, more power to them, I guess.
Okay.
Do you have anything? Okay. Councilmember Hoffa, I think you had a motion.
Yeah, I would move staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, so motion and seconded. For whatever it's worth, because part of the public comment and the direction that it seems like there's some effort to, I wasn't familiar with this kind of lifestyle thing that's happening in malls, and so it's intriguing. And to me, a big part of lifestyle is housing. So for whatever it's worth, I wonder where there might be opportunities to continue those conversations with management. So love to chat maybe afterwards and see where we can pick up the conversation on that. But with that, let's go ahead and do roll call vote, please.
Is just to confirm that it's the recommendation, the planning commission recommendation, was that also the staff recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
And this motion include, no, I was gonna say, trial option for council members. No, just kidding. Just kidding. You're kidding for the record, kidding.
Councilmember Barber,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
and Mayor Williamson.
That's a yes for me. Congratulations. Imagine if we said no. Oh man, that would not be pretty. Take care, you guys. Thanks for sitting through this.
Take care.
As everybody clears out. Wait, you don't want to hear council comments? Right. Can somebody get oh the chief is already over it.
Did he not get in?
Did you see the city manager in the attorney's office when I said that?
Oh, yeah.
He was like, no.
Mayor, we need to go into, before we go into closed session, to ask for public comments because Mr. Moore is here and he would like to comment on the closed session item.
Okay. Interestingly enough, that is not in my whatchamacallit, but okay. Yeah. Oh, I can't read. All right, so we'll go to council comments first. Oh, is it okay? Can I switch things? I don't know if, can I move that up so that they can go?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll go to public comments for items on closed session, and just to be clear about what's on the closed session, we need new chairs. We have CS1, which is more imported cars, 1187 Del Monte, CS2 Dust Bowl Brewing, 290 Figueroa Street, and CS3 Mamiya labor negotiations. So we'll open it up for public comments for items that are on the closed session.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'll make this quick. Thank you for all being here and your service. My name is Karen Tate. This is my husband, Brett Tate. We are the owners of Dust Bowl Brewing Company. And we just want to start by saying thank you for allowing us to rent the facility. And we've been very happy there. We have great local employees. We've been able to build our brand. We've tried to connect with the community on different activities and supporting the local community. And we'd like to continue to do this. And if you have any questions for us, we'd love to answer those tonight because we've appreciated what the city has done for us, what the police have done for us and fire, and being able just to support us in building our brand and our business. So we appreciate all those connections. So thank you.
Thanks for coming tonight and sharing.
Any questions?
Nope, I think we can't take questions, but we appreciate your public comment. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. You all were here since the beginning too, man. I could have moved this up and let you all out a little bit. No, that's fair. That's fair. Maybe we can come by Dust Bowl afterwards. No. Take care, you all. Have a good night. Any other public comments on closed session agenda items in the chamber? Anybody have online?
No hands raised.
Okay, so we'll go back to council comments. Who wants to start off? Councilmember Barber's good. Councilmember Garcia is good. Councilmember Hoffa.
Yeah, I just wanted to let council know that at AMBAG, our regional planning body, there is some grant money that's going to be available for basically the various cities to support our housing endeavors. So So those grants come in two. There's competitive grants, and there are also sort of fixed grants that all of the cities or jurisdictions are eligible for. And we made one adjustment to that to try to give the cities that have a larger RENA number, like the city of Monterey, a larger fixed grant. So not everybody agreed with that, but that was that was the decision. So I think we are eligible for, I think, 180,000 as one of the cities that has a larger RENA number. And then there are also other monies that are available for in competitive grants, which I think we would be competitive for as well. So I'm sure Kim knows all about that, but you may not. So just wanted to share it with you.
Appreciate that update. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, three things. One, the subcommittee, I think it's time that we agendize and talk about the appointments and the process. We had one comment tonight. I know we approved of the vacancies for various boards and commissions in NCIP. But I think given that we've got new members on the council, I'd like to agendize that and bring that back with the direction that we talk about it and decide is the way forward the way we want to continue doing it, or is it time to consider a subcommittee? So I'd like to see us agendize that. And I think we would call that under the heading of governance guidance, but discussing that. So agendizing that, say, in the next couple of months, I think would be appropriate. I serve on MST board, and just to give you the update, the process is going through for the surf lane improvement on Highway 1, southbound and northbound, and it's going through its final EIR. And there's been one lawsuit withdrawn, and I think there's still one remaining. So it's making progress, and satisfied with that, and we'll give you reports as we move forward. So looking at the possibility of that being a late 2024 start of some minor construction. The other topics is I wanted to remind everybody that this is this week, last week was the National Law Enforcement Memorial Week, and celebrations of honor of those fallen took place in Sacramento and Washington, DC. And so we had one local officer from the city of Salinas in 2022 who lost his life. So recognition of Mr. Alvarado and all those local of Monterey County who have lost their lives. And that celebration of life was in Sacramento last week. So just want to honor those in law enforcement who have lost their lives serving their communities. And that's all, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I'll echo the need for our discussion around the process and selecting nomination or filling the vacancies for the boards, commissions, and committees in the context of our governance discussion. And so I'll follow up with Hans to make sure that we can get that agendized here as quickly as possible so that we can discuss that and a couple of other items that I think we have anticipated talking about in that context. So one of the funding sources, and Alan was just speaking to AMBAG, and I don't know where this falls into place, but I think there's a funding type from the state. It's like the Housing Consortium. And I don't know what that looks like for us to apply for that funding, but definitely glad to hear that there's opportunities ahead, and definitely we need to look at where we can bring any additional funding in to support the housing effort. So I appreciate that update, Alan. I was typing a statement here. I don't know what I'm saying. During the public comment at the beginning of the meeting, Esther had spoke to some concerns around renter protections and sharing this these anecdotal stories, and we keep hearing them. She shared them. She actually pointed out that we don't hear them, but I would disagree with that. I hear stories all the time from renters that are having different types of issues, and it's really hard for, I think, folks to contextualize that, which makes it all the more important for us to create some type of formalized system within the city to be able to provide support for that part of our community. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that because that comment stuck out to me earlier. And I can imagine how confusing it might be. And so if we don't have some kind of formalized process in regards to how to handle creating protections for our renter community, then we're not going to be able to address the needs of the majority of our city, the residents in our city. Lastly, I'll end with an update on Monterey One Water. I believe I shared previously that we had moved forward with Cal-Am had signed the water purchase agreement. So on April 4th, that happened. And what that did is actually allowed the amended and restated water purchase agreement to be fully executed. And that's a contract between Cal-Am, Monterey One Water, and the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. There are two parts to the construction there's two construction bids associated with the expansion. The first part is the actual expansion of Pure Water Monterey, and the second part is the injection well facilities phase 4. So they're going to actually add more injection wells that will allow more water to be pumped into the aquifer, the seaside aquifer. To date, and this is actually as of our board meeting from April, so we're exceeding this even at this point, but 10,500 acre feet have come out of the Pure Water Monterey system, which translates over to 3.4 billion gallons of new drinking water produced and delivered. The expansion project will add 2,250 acre feet of additional feet of water per year, and that will total 5,750 acre feet per year from the entire project. The board will be looking at the construction contracts, and they'll be awarded by July 31st, on or by July 31st. And so after those contracts are awarded, we'll be able to move forward with construction. So I imagine in August, we'll break ground and start construction on the expansion of both of those construction bids. There also was $42 million in grants that have been awarded to Monterey One Water for the expansion. And the total estimated cost of the expansion right now is at $72 million. So that's almost 60% of the entire cost. So that's, I think, a win for our community overall and for our ratepayers that will have to bear the cost of this additional project, just making it further, more affordable and just a great environmental project. And the last point that I'll make about this is that the construction of the project is estimated to be completed by the end of 2025. So that is my updates. Let me go back to my notes here. Pass it to the city manager for a report.
Thank you. We held a successful community meeting at the Kona Community Center to talk about the reopening and purpose of the Casanova Oakno Community Center on Saturday, as Esther was talking about. Also a good attendance, about 125 folks showed up in Montecito to talk also about their ideas and plans for the use of that community center. We will close a survey that is accompanying this research project by tomorrow, and then we'll make part of the results part of the budget presentation as well. The Sports Center will celebrate its 31st anniversary on June 1st this year. With that, I wanted to share with you next week, Wednesday, we have a special meeting, and we will present to you the analysis that we ran over the past 5-6 months about the Sports Center assessment. So how are we running the Sports Center? We had a third party looking at that, and we will present all that to you next week, Wednesday at 4 p.m. On Wednesday, on May 30th, we will hold a town hall meeting at the Monterey Conference Center. Media releases went out today. We'll notify also through our other channels, including a postcard mailer to every household, and it will have as a topic the rental inventory for Monterey. The town hall is scheduled from 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. We also have accompanying survey out on Have Your Say Monterey. And that's all what I have for you today.
Thank you, Hans. We did public comment in closed session, so we'll go ahead and adjourn to closed session. Thank you, everybody.